When Ethan Cross gave his blood to save a dying child, he had no idea the girl's mother was the same CEO who had humiliated him hours earlier, or that his single act of sacrifice would force the most powerful woman in Columbus to choose between the empire she built and the humanity she'd forgotten. If you believe that kindness can break through even the coldest heart, stay with me until the end. And hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The first pale threads of dawn hadn't yet touched the Columbus skyline when Ethan Cross pushed his cleaning cart through the marble lobby of Alderstone Industries for the last time that shift. His shoulders ached, the kind of deep, bone-tired ache that came from 6 straight hours of scrubbing floors, emptying executive trash cans, and pretending he didn't notice the way people looked through him like he was part of the furniture. He'd learned that invisibility was its own kind of armor in places like this, where the difference between the 20th floor and the basement wasn't just altitude, but an entire universe of assumed worth. Ethan didn't mind the work itself. Honest labor had never bothered him. What gnawed at him was the knowledge of what he used to be, what he could still be if circumstances had been different. 6 years ago, he'd been 3 semesters away from a mechanical engineering degree, top of his class, with professors who'd said his name like it meant something. Then Maya was born premature, fighting for every breath in a NICU incubator, and her mother had walked away before the hospital bans were even off. Suddenly, Ethan's future had narrowed to a single point. Keep his daughter alive, keep her safe, keep her fed. The degree could wait. His pride could wait. Everything could wait except Maya. Now, at 28, he was a ghost in a building full of people who wouldn't remember his face if they passed him on the street. He wore the navy uniform of Alderstone's contract cleaning company, a name tag that nobody read, and the careful expression of someone who'd learned that the less you reacted, the less people noticed you at all. He was wiping down the brass railings near the executive elevators when he heard the click of heels on marble. Sharp, purposeful, the kind of sound that announced importance. Ethan didn't look up. He'd learned that lesson his first week. Keep your head down, do your work. Don't make eye contact with anyone whose salary had more zeros than yours. Excuse me. You. The voice was cold, clipped, and used to being obeyed. Ethan's hand stilled on the railing. Slowly, he turned. Celeste Harrington stood 10 feet away, and even in the pre-dawn dimness of the lobby, she seemed to gather light around her like a weapon. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back so severely it looked painful, and a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan made in 3 months. Her face was striking in the way of marble statues, beautiful, bloodless, and absolutely without mercy. In the 18 months Ethan had worked at Alderstone, he'd seen the CEO exactly twice, both times from a distance. Up close, she was even more formidable. Yes, ma'am? Ethan kept his voice neutral, professional, respectful in the way that people in power expected from people without it. Celeste's eyes, a pale, unsettling gray, flicked over him with the same assessment she might give a malfunctioning appliance. The executive elevator has been out of service for 20 minutes. I have a 6 a.m. call with Tokyo that I cannot miss because maintenance can't do their job. Ethan's jaw tightened fractionally, but he kept his expression smooth. I'm with the cleaning crew, ma'am. Maintenance is a different department, but I can call. I don't care what department you're with. Her voice could have cut glass. I care that I pay for services that apparently don't function. What's your name? For a moment, Ethan considered lying, but his name was printed right there on the tag above his pocket, and something about this woman suggested she didn't tolerate evasion. Ethan Cross. Well, Ethan Cross, when you're finished making excuses, perhaps you could try doing something useful and fix the elevator. Or is that too much to expect from someone who's been standing here chatting while I waste my morning? The unfairness of it hit like a slap. Ethan had been working, not chatting. He wasn't qualified to repair elevators, wasn't authorized to touch them, and wouldn't know where to start even if he were. But Celeste Harrington didn't care about any of that. She cared that something in her domain wasn't working, and he was the nearest person to blame. Before Ethan could formulate a response that wouldn't get him fired, the elevator chimed softly and the doors slid open. A maintenance worker emerged, tool bag in hand, looking harried. I'll fix Ms. Harrington, the man said quickly. Just a sensor issue. Won't happen again. Celeste's attention shifted to the maintenance worker for exactly 2 seconds. See that it doesn't. Then her gaze returned to Ethan, and there was something in her expression that made his stomach turn. A kind of casual contempt, as if his existence was itself an irritation she had to endure. Perhaps next time you can coordinate better with your colleagues instead of making excuses about departments. She stepped into the elevator without waiting for a response. Just before the doors closed, Ethan caught her reflection in the polished brass. She'd already dismissed him entirely, her attention on her phone, his presence forgotten as completely as if he'd never existed. The maintenance worker gave Ethan a sympathetic look. Don't take it personal, man. She's like that with everyone. Yeah. Ethan's voice came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and returned to his cleaning cart, gripping the handle hard enough that his knuckles went white. He wasn't angry, or rather, he couldn't afford to be angry. Anger was a luxury for people who had options. He was just tired, bone deep, soul tired in a way that sleep never quite fixed. By the time his shift ended at 6:30, Ethan had scrubbed the encounter from his mind the way he scrubbed coffee stains from executive carpets, thoroughly and without leaving a trace. He clocked out, changed in the basement locker room, and emerged into the October morning air wearing jeans and his old university hoodie, the one with the mechanical engineering logo that he couldn't quite bring himself to throw away. His daughter was waiting. Maya was staying with Mrs. Chen, their neighbor in the apartment building, a widow in her 70s who'd become something like a grandmother to them both. Ethan paid her what he could, less than she deserved, more than he could really afford, and Mrs. Chen pretended it was enough. The arrangement worked because both of them needed it to work. Maya had someone safe to stay with during Ethan's night shifts, and Mrs. Chen had someone to fuss over besides her cats. Ethan climbed the stairs to their third-floor apartment. The elevator had been broken for 6 weeks, and knocked softly on Mrs. Chen's door. She opened it with a finger pressed to her lips. She just fell back asleep half an hour ago, Mrs. Chen whispered. Woke up at 4 asking for you. Guilt twisted in Ethan's chest. I'm sorry, I should have... Stop. Mrs. Chen's voice was gentle but firm, the same tone she probably used on her own children decades ago. You're doing your best. That child knows she's loved. That's what matters. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. Mrs. Chen stepped aside, and he moved quietly into her apartment. Maya was curled up on the sofa under Mrs. Chen's knitted afghan, her dark curls spread across the pillow. She looked impossibly small, impossibly fragile. The scar from her heart surgery 3 years ago was hidden beneath her pajama top, but Ethan never forgot it was there. He never forgot how close he'd come to losing her, or how much the medical bills still weighed on him like stones. He gathered Maya carefully into his arms. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Daddy? Her voice was sleep-soft and confused. Hey, baby girl, I'm here. Let's go home. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. She smelled like Mrs. Chen's lavender soap in childhood, and Ethan felt something in his chest loosen slightly. This was why he endured the humiliation, the exhaustion, the constant financial knife edge. This right here, this weight in his arms that was the entire world. Their apartment was small, a one-bedroom that Ethan had tried to make cheerful with thrift store furniture and Maya's artwork taped to every wall. He settled Maya into her bed. He took the pull-out couch in the living room and tucked the blankets around her. She was already drifting back to sleep, but her hand caught his. Daddy, we have the doctor today. I know, sweetheart, this afternoon, just a checkup. Will Dr. Morrison let me pick a sticker again? I bet she'll let you pick too. Maya smiled, satisfied, and released his hand. Within moments, her breathing had evened out into the deep rhythm of childhood sleep. Ethan stood there for a long moment, watching her. Then he moved to the kitchen and made himself instant coffee, the cheap kind that tasted like regret but contained caffeine, and sat at their small table with the stack of bills he'd been avoiding. Rent was due in 5 days. The hospital sent monthly payment reminders for Maya's ongoing cardiology appointments, each one a negotiated payment plan that felt like it would last until she was old enough to have children of her own. His own health insurance, the bare-bones catastrophic plan, had a deductible so high it might as well not exist. He did the math. He always did the math, even though the numbers never changed. If he picked up weekend shifts at the warehouse across town, if he skipped meals a few days a week, if he let the internet bills slide another month, if he walked to work instead of taking the bus, if he wore his shoes until they literally fell apart, maybe they'd be okay. His phone buzzed, a reminder for Maya's appointment at 2 p.m. at St. Vincent's Hospital. Ethan rubbed his eyes. He'd get maybe 3 hours of sleep before he needed to wake up and get Maya ready. 3 hours to rest a body that felt decades older than 28. Worth it. Always worth it. The pediatric cardiology wing of St. Vincent's Hospital had tried to be cheerful. There were murals of cartoon animals on the walls, a play area with worn toys, and chairs in primary colors that were supposed to make anxious parents feel less like they were waiting for bad news. It never quite worked. Every parent in that waiting room knew exactly what they were waiting for: confirmation that their child's broken heart was still holding together, still fighting, still here. Ethan sat in one of those bright chairs with Maya on his lap, her head tucked under his chin. She'd been brave during the checkup, hadn't cried when Dr. Morrison listened to her heart, hadn't complained during the EKG. Now, waiting for the results, she was finally letting herself be small again. "The fish one," Maya said, pointing at the aquarium mural. "That's my favorite." "Yeah? What about the giraffe?" "Giraffes are okay, but fish are better because they can swim anywhere they want." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "That's pretty good logic." Dr. Morrison emerged from the back offices, and Ethan's heart rate kicked up the way it always did. But the cardiologist was smiling, and Ethan felt his shoulders drop half an inch. "Everything looks good," Dr. Morrison said, crouching down to Maya's level. "Your heart is working exactly like it should. You're being very good about taking your medicine, aren't you?" Maya nodded seriously. "Daddy makes me take it every morning with breakfast, even when it tastes yucky." "That's what dads are for, making sure you take yucky medicine and letting you pick stickers." Dr. Morrison produced a sheet of holographic stickers. "Go ahead, two, like we talked about." While Maya deliberated with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice, Dr. Morrison straightened and lowered her voice. "Her numbers really are excellent, Mr. Cross. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "Thank you." Ethan's voice was rough. "When do we need to come back?" 6 months. Sooner if you notice any changes, shortness of breath, fatigue, anything unusual. But I expect smooth sailing. 6 months. Ethan did the math automatically. 6 more months of payment plans, 6 more months of warehouse shifts, 6 more months of holding his breath. But 6 more months of Maya laughing, growing, living. The calculation was easy. They left the cardiology wing hand in hand, Maya clutching her chosen stickers, a purple unicorn and a gold star, and chattering about whether Mrs. Chen would want to see them. Ethan was listening with half his attention, the other half already calculating whether they had time to stop at the discount grocery store before his evening shift started, when the hospital's PA system crackled to life. "Code Blue Pediatric Emergency Department, Code Blue Pediatric Emergency Department, all available personnel respond immediately." The announcement repeated, and Ethan saw staff members suddenly moving faster, their expression sharpening. Code Blue meant someone was dying. Somewhere in this building, someone's child was slipping away, and every second mattered. Ethan's grip tightened on Maya's hand. Not his daughter, not today, but someone's daughter, and his heart ached for whoever was about to receive the worst news of their life. They were almost to the main exit when the screaming started. It came from a corridor to their left, a woman's voice, raw and breaking, the sound of a mother watching her world end. Ava, baby, stay with me. Someone help us. Please, someone help my daughter." Ethan froze. People were running now, nurses, doctors, security, but the screaming was getting closer, more desperate. And then he saw them. A woman in an expensive coat stumbling into the main hallway, her hands covered in blood, and in her arms, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, unconscious, bleeding. The woman, wild-eyed, her perfect hair falling from its pins, was turning in circles like she didn't know where she was. She just collapsed. She was fine, and then please, someone, a nurse reached her first. "Ma'am, we need you to—" The little girl convulsed suddenly, her small body seizing, and the woman dropped to her knees on the tile floor, still holding her daughter, keening like an animal. The nurse was trying to take the child, but the mother's arms had locked around her, and the precious seconds were ticking away. Ethan didn't think. He let go of Maya's hand and moved. Later, he wouldn't remember crossing the hallway, wouldn't remember the moment he dropped to his knees beside the bleeding child and the mother who was too panicked to help her. His body simply acted, some deep instinct older than thought taking over, the same instinct that had kept Maya alive when she stopped breathing in the NICU, when her tiny heart had stuttered and failed, when he'd called for help but knew he might be the only help she had. "I need you to let go," Ethan said to the woman. His voice was calm, firm. "I know you're scared, but I need you to let me help her." The woman's eyes focused on him, and Ethan felt a shock of recognition like touching a live wire. Even with her face streaked with tears and blood, even with her composure shattered like glass, he knew her. Celeste Harrington, the CEO who'd humiliated him 6 hours ago. The woman who'd looked at him like he was nothing. For one fractured second, their eyes met, and he saw that she recognized him too. Saw the janitor, saw the man she'd dismissed. Then the little girl, Ava, seized again, and nothing else mattered. "Let me help her," Ethan repeated. Celeste's arms loosened, and Ethan carefully took the child. She was small, too small. Her lips tinged blue. He turned her onto her side, supporting her head. "She's seizing. We need to protect her airway. When did she last eat?" I don't know. Lunch. Maybe 1 o'clock. 2 hours. Probably safe to position her without worrying about aspiration." The seizure was beginning to slow, the terrible rigid shaking easing into tremors. Ethan kept his hand steady, kept his voice calm. "Is she epileptic?" No, this has never happened before." A doctor arrived, emergency team behind him. Ethan immediately shifted back, giving them space but keeping his hands on Ava until the doctor had her. 7-year-old female, witnessed seizure activity, duration approximately 45 seconds, decreased responsiveness, possible head trauma, significant blood loss from... He checked quickly. "Looks like a scalp laceration." The doctor shot him a quick, appraising look. "You have medical training?" "No, just experience." It wasn't really an answer, but the emergency team was already moving, lifting Ava onto a gurney, checking vitals, calling out numbers that Ethan had learned to decode during Maya's hospitalizations. The little girl was alive, stable enough to move. That was something. Celeste Harrington was trying to follow, but a nurse caught her arm gently. "Ma'am, they're taking her to trauma. We need you to stay here for just a moment." "That's my daughter." Celeste's voice was raw, stripped of all its earlier cold authority. "That's my daughter." "I know. And they're going to take excellent care of her, but we need some information. Her full name, her date of birth, any allergies, any medications." Ethan backed away slowly, returning to Maya. His daughter's face was pale, her eyes huge. "Daddy, is she going to be okay?" "I hope so, baby." Ethan pulled Maya close and realized his hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with him. "I really hope so." They were almost out of the hallway when the hospital PA crackled again. This time, the voice was different, tighter, more urgent. "Code red alert. Critical blood shortage. We are issuing a code red alert for O-negative blood. Repeat, urgent need for O-negative blood donors. All staff and visitors with O-negative blood type, please report to the donation center immediately. This is a code red alert." The announcement repeated twice more. O-negative, the universal donor. Rare enough that only 7% of the population had it. Ethan's blood type. He looked down at Maya, then back toward the trauma wing where they'd taken Ava Harrington. A little girl who'd been conscious and laughing one moment, seizing and bleeding the next. A little girl whose mother had looked at him with eyes stripped of everything but terror. "Daddy?" Maya tugged his hand. "We should go home, right? Mrs. Chen is making soup." Ethan swallowed hard. He was exhausted. He had a shift tonight. He needed to sleep, needed to eat, needed to take care of his own daughter. Walking away was the reasonable choice, the safe choice. But he kept seeing Ava's blue lips, her small body convulsing, her mother's desperate hands. He kept hearing the code red alert echoing through the hallways. "Maya, sweetheart, I need to do something first." Ethan crouched down to her level. Remember how Daddy gave blood once before? For that boy in your class's mom? Maya nodded slowly. The hospital needs blood right now for a little girl who's hurt. It won't take long, but I need to help. Can you be brave for me? Can you sit in the donation center and read your book while I help? Maya's small hand tightened in his. She looked scared, but she nodded. Is it the girl who was bleeding? I think so. Then we should help. Maya's voice was very small but very certain. Because she's somebody's whole world, right? Like I'm yours? Ethan's throat closed. He pulled his daughter into a fierce hug. Yeah, baby, just like that. Well, the donation center was chaos controlled by professional calm. Nurses moved with quick efficiency, checking donors in, verifying blood types, setting up stations. A steady stream of people had answered the code red. Hospital staff mostly, still in their scrubs, rolling up sleeves and settling into chairs without being asked. Ethan checked in at the desk. The nurse scanned his driver's license and looked up with visible relief. O negative? Yes. Have you donated in the last 8 weeks? No, last time was 4 months ago. Any recent illnesses, travel outside the country, new medications? No, no, and no. Perfect. Take a seat in Bay 3. We'll get you started immediately. Ethan settled Maya in the waiting area with her backpack and her worn copy of Charlotte's Web. She looked up at him with those huge dark eyes, trying to be brave. It doesn't hurt much, right? Just a little pinch. I'll be right over there where you can see me, okay? Bay 3 was a reclining chair next to a beeping machine. Ethan sat down and rolled up his sleeve. The nurse, her name tag said Jenny, tied off his arm and swabbed the inside of his elbow with cold antiseptic. This is good of you, Jenny said as she positioned the needle. We got the call about 10 minutes ago. Little girl in emergency surgery lost a lot of blood. Every unit we can get matters. The needle slid in, and Ethan watched his blood flow dark red into the collection bag. It was strange, visceral, seeing something so essential leaving his body, but also powerful in a way he couldn't quite name. This part of him, this literal piece of his life, might keep someone else alive. How much do you need? He asked. Standard donation is 1 unit, about a pint. Jenny adjusted the machine. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. What if you need more than that? Jenny looked at him carefully. We can do a double donation, but that takes longer and it's harder on the donor. You'd need to meet certain weight and health requirements. I weigh 185. I'm healthy. If you need more, take more. Mr. Cross, that's generous, but how much does a child need for emergency surgery? Jenny hesitated. Depends on the injury and their size. Could be 2 units, could be 4. We're getting donations from multiple people, so do you have enough O negative right now? Right this second? The pause was answer enough. Then take 2 units, Ethan said. I can handle it. Jenny studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, but you're staying here for monitoring afterwards, and you're drinking juice and eating something before you leave. Doctor's orders. Deal. The machine hummed. His blood flowed. Across the waiting area, Maya was reading, her lips moving slightly with the words. Other donors cycled through, giving their pint, getting their juice and cookie, heading back to their lives. But Ethan stayed, his arm extended, as the first unit finished and Jenny adjusted the machine for the second. You're doing great, she said. How do you feel? Fine. It was mostly true. A little lightheaded maybe, a little cold, but fine. The donation center door burst open. Celeste Harrington stumbled in, and Ethan barely recognized her. The severe CEO from this morning, from a lifetime ago, was gone. This woman wore surgical scrub pants and a hospital gown tied hastily over her expensive silk blouse. Her feet were bare except for paper hospital slippers. Her hair had fallen completely from its pins, hanging wild around her face. Her hands were still stained with her daughter's blood. She looked like she'd been through a war. I need to give blood, Celeste said to the nurse at the desk. Her voice was hoarse. My daughter, they said she needs O negative. I need to give blood. The desk nurse checked her computer quickly. Ma'am, what's your blood type? A positive, but they said she needs more O negative, and I'm her mother. I need to... I'm sorry, the nurse said gently. A positive blood can't be used for an O-negative recipient. The antibodies would cause rejection, but we have donors here right now, and I don't care about antibodies, Celeste's voice cracked. That's my daughter up there, bleeding out on an operating table, and you're telling me I can't help her? I can't do anything? Ma'am, I understand this is— You don't understand, you don't— Celeste's knees seemed to buckle. She caught herself on the desk, her shoulders heaving. Please, there has to be something, anything. The desk nurse came around and took Celeste's arm, supporting her weight. Your daughter is getting the blood she needs. We have multiple O-negative donors responding to the code red right now. But you need to take care of yourself, okay? The surgical team will update you as soon as— I need to see her. Celeste was crying now, open and ugly and desperate. I need to be with her. They won't let you in the OR, you know that, but there's a family waiting area on the surgical floor where I can't just sit there. Celeste pulled away, and her wild eyes swept the donation center, looking for something, anything, some way to feel less helpless. Her gaze landed on the donors in their chairs, on the bags of blood being collected and labeled, and locked onto Ethan. Their eyes met for the second time that day. This time, there was no contempt in her face, no cold assessment, just raw recognition. The janitor she'd dismissed this morning, the man who'd caught her daughter in the hallway, now lying in a donation chair, his blood flowing into a collection bag that might already be tagged for emergency surgery. For Ava, Celeste's face did something complicated. Shock, shame, gratitude, horror, all flickering across her features too quickly to name. She took one stumbling step toward him, then seemed to realize she was barefoot in a public space, covered in blood, falling apart in front of a man she'd treated like furniture. You— Her voice broke. You're giving blood, Ethan said quietly. That's all. Jenny had paused the collection, sensing the sudden tension in the room. Ma'am, do you know this donor? Celeste couldn't seem to form words. She just stood there, swaying slightly, staring at Ethan with an expression he couldn't read. We met this morning, Ethan said, which was technically true. I hope your daughter is okay, Ms. Harrington. The use of her name seemed to snap something in Celeste. She pressed a hand to her mouth, and for a moment Ethan thought she might throw up or faint. Then she turned and fled, her paper slippers slapping against the tile as she ran back toward the surgical wing. Jenny let out a slow breath. Well, that was intense. Yeah. Ethan looked at the blood bag, now more than halfway full with the second unit. Can we finish this? You sure you're okay? You looked pale there for a second. I'm fine, just finish it. The machine hummed back to life. Maya had looked up from her book, her face worried, but Ethan gave her a thumbs up and she slowly returned to reading. The other donors in the room were pretending they hadn't just witnessed whatever that was. The desk nurse was typing rapidly, probably documenting the incident. Ethan closed his eyes and tried not to think about Celeste Harrington's bare feet and bloody hands, or the way she'd looked at him like he was the answer to a question she didn't know how to ask. He tried not to think about Ava, small and seizing, her lips turning blue. He tried not to think about Maya, and how easily that could have been her on the gurney, him screaming in the hallway, some stranger deciding whether to help. But mostly, he tried not to think about how strange it was that his blood, the blood of someone Celeste Harrington had deemed worthless this morning, might now be the only thing keeping her daughter alive. By the time Jenny disconnected him from the machine, Ethan was definitely feeling it. Not pain exactly, but a hollowness, like someone had scooped out his insides and replaced them with cotton. His vision swam when he tried to sit up. Whoa, easy! Jenny pressed him back into the chair. You just gave 2 units. You're staying put until I say otherwise. She brought him orange juice in a plastic cup and a package of peanut butter crackers. Ethan drank the juice in 3 long swallows and felt fractionally more human. The crackers were harder. His stomach felt uncertain about the whole concept of food, but Jenny watched him with folded arms until he ate them. Okay, she said. Now you're staying in that chair for another 15 minutes minimum. If you try to stand up and faceplant, I will be very annoyed. Yes, ma'am. Jenny's expression softened. That was a really good thing you did. Not just the double donation, but the way you helped that little girl in the hallway. I heard about it. You kept her stable until the trauma team got there. I just did what anyone would do. No, Jenny said quietly. You did what someone with training would do, or someone with experience that taught them what training should. There's a difference. She left him with a juice refill and instructions not to move. Ethan sipped slowly and watched Maya, who'd finished her chapter and was now drawing in her notebook. She felt his gaze and looked up, smiling. All done? Almost. Just resting for a few minutes. Okay, Maya returned to her drawing unbothered. She'd spent enough time in hospitals to know that resting was code for making sure Daddy doesn't fall over. The donation center had quieted. The code red was apparently satisfied. Enough O-negative collected to handle the immediate emergency. Donors were finishing up, getting their juice and cookies, heading out. A nurse came through with a clipboard, thanking people personally, her relief visible. Ethan was on minute 12 of his mandated 15 when his phone buzzed. A text from the warehouse supervisor. Can you take a double shift tonight? Tony called out sick. Time and a half after 8 hours. Ethan stared at the message. Time and a half would mean an extra $70, maybe $80. That was Maya's medication copay for the month. That was the overdue internet bill. That was breathing room. But he'd just given 2 pints of blood. His body felt like it was held together with string and stubbornness. A normal 8-hour shift would be hard enough. A double, 16 hours of lifting, moving, loading, might actually break him. His finger hovered over the keyboard. Don't even think about it. Ethan looked up. Jenny had returned, and she was reading his face like a book. You just gave a double donation, she said. You need to go home, eat real food, drink a lot of water, and sleep. You definitely do not need to go do physical labor. I appreciate the concern. It's not concern, it's medical advice. Your blood volume is depleted. Your body is working overtime to compensate. If you push yourself too hard tonight, you could pass out, hurt yourself, or worse. Jenny's voice gentled slightly. I know you probably need the money. Most people who give double donations do it because they can't afford not to. But you can't help your daughter if you end up in an ER bed yourself. Ethan looked at Maya, then at his phone, then at the message offering time and a half for a shift that might actually kill him. He typed, Sorry, can't tonight. Maybe next week. And sent it before he could change his mind. Good choice, Jenny said. She marked something on her chart. Okay, you're cleared to leave, but seriously, food, water, sleep, doctor's orders. Ethan stood carefully, the room tilted slightly, then steadied. He took a few experimental steps. His legs held. Thank you, he said to Jenny. For everything. Thank you for being the kind of person who shows up when it matters. She smiled. Not everyone does. Ethan collected Maya and her backpack, and they headed toward the exit. The hospital was settling into its evening rhythm, visiting hours winding down, dinner trays being collected, the day shift handing off to night. Ethan moved slowly, one hand on Maya's shoulder as much for his own balance as for guiding her. They were passing the surgical wing when he saw her. Celeste Harrington sat alone in a family waiting area visible through glass walls. She'd changed into clean scrubs now, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, her face scrubbed clean. She looked young, Ethan thought. Stripped of her armor of power and makeup and expensive clothes, she looked like what she was, a terrified mother waiting to hear if her child would live. She sat with her elbows on her knees, her face in her hands, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to fold herself small enough to disappear. Completely alone. No husband, no family, no one to sit with her in the worst hours of her life. Ethan hesitated. He should keep walking, should take Maya home, should stay as far away from Celeste Harrington as possible. But he kept thinking about those bare feet and bloody hands, kept thinking about the way she'd looked at him in the donation center, like he'd done something incomprehensible, something that didn't fit in her understanding of how the world worked. Daddy? Maya tugged his hand. Can we go? Yeah, baby. Just wait here for 1 second, okay? Stay right here where I can see you. Ethan walked into the waiting area. Celeste didn't look up until he was standing directly in front of her. Then her head jerked up, and Ethan saw that her eyes were red-rimmed, her face blotchy from crying. Mr. Cross. Her voice was rough, raw. I wasn't expecting... I just wanted to check if you'd heard anything, Ethan said quietly. About Ava. Celeste's face did something complicated. She's still in surgery, they said. Her voice cracked. They said the next few hours are critical. She hit her head when she collapsed. Skull fracture, brain bleed. They're trying to... She stopped, pressing her fist to her mouth. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. It's okay. It's not okay. Celeste's laugh was bitter and broken. Nothing about this is okay. This morning She stopped, and Ethan saw shame flood her face. This morning I was cruel to you. I was dismissive and rude and treated you like you were... It's fine. It's not fine. Celeste's voice rose, raw with emotion. I treated you like you were nothing, and then when my daughter was dying, you were the one who... She stopped, her breath hitching. The doctor said you probably saved her life in that hallway. That if you hadn't stabilized her airway during the seizure, she might have aspirated or stopped breathing entirely. And then you gave blood. 2 units. Your blood might be in her veins right now, keeping her alive, and I don't understand. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. You don't need to understand. Your daughter needed help. I helped. But why? Celeste looked up at him, her pale eyes bewildered and desperate. After the way I spoke to you, why would you... Because she's a little girl who was scared, Ethan said simply, and I could help. That's all there is to it. Celeste stared at him like he was speaking a language she didn't know. Then slowly she buried her face in her hands and started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Ethan stood there awkwardly, uncertain. Comforting a stranger felt presumptuous. Comforting his own boss, however indirectly, felt impossible. But walking away while she fell apart felt worse. He sat down in the chair next to her, not too close, leaving space, and waited. Eventually, Celeste's sobs quieted to ragged breathing. She wiped her face with her hands, then laughed bitterly. I'm sorry, I don't fall apart in front of people. It's okay to fall apart when your daughter's in surgery. I don't fall apart, period. I'm Celeste Harrington. I run a $2 billion company. I make decisions that affect thousands of people's lives. Her voice broke again. I don't know what to do when none of that matters. When I can't fix it or control it or throw money at it. I've never felt so helpless in my life. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. That's parenthood. Celeste looked at him sharply. You have children? A daughter, Maya. She's 6. And Celeste stopped, reading something in his face. She's been sick. She has a heart condition. We're managing it. Ethan didn't elaborate. But I know what it's like to sit in a hospital wondering if your kid's going to make it. It's the worst thing in the world. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the glass wall, Ethan could see Maya in the hallway, sitting against the wall with her book, patient and small and perfectly trusting that her father would come back. She's beautiful, Celeste said softly, following his gaze. Your daughter. Thank you. She's everything. Ava is everything to me, too. Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. I know I'm not warm. I'm not maternal in the way people expect. I work too much. I miss school events. I have a nanny and a driver, and I order takeout more nights than I cook, but I love her more than anything in this world. And if she doesn't, She will, Ethan said firmly. She's young, she's strong, and she's got the best surgeons in Columbus fighting for her. She's going to make it. You can't know that. No, Ethan admitted, but I can hope it. And sometimes hope is all you've got. Celeste looked at him for a long moment, then very quietly. Thank you for helping her, for giving blood, for... She gestured helplessly. For being kind when I wasn't. I don't know how to repay... You don't, Ethan said. You don't repay someone for helping your kid. You just take care of her and be grateful she's alive. He stood up, his body protesting the movement. The donation was catching up with him, exhaustion settling into his bones like lead. I hope you get good news soon, Ms. Harrington. I really do. Celeste, she said, you gave blood to save my daughter. I think you can call me Celeste. Then I hope you get good news, Celeste. He walked back to Maya, took her hand and headed for the exit. Behind him, Celeste Harrington sat alone in the waiting room, looking smaller and more human than he'd thought possible. In the parking lot, Maya looked up at him. Is the girl going to be okay? I hope so, baby. Her mom looked really sad. Yeah, she's scared. That's what happens when someone you love is hurt. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, Daddy, you look really tired. I am really tired. Can we get dinner from the place with the good soup, the one Mrs. Chen likes? Yeah. Ethan's wallet was lighter than it should be, but tonight he needed soup more than he needed financial responsibility. Yeah, we can do that. They walked to the bus stop together hand in hand as the October sun sank lower and the streetlights flickered on. Somewhere behind them, Celeste Harrington waited for news about her daughter. Somewhere in the hospital, Ethan's blood flowed through tubes and machines, keeping a little girl alive. But here, now, Maya was chattering about her book, and the bus was coming, and Ethan was so tired he could barely stand, but his daughter was safe, and that was enough. That was always enough. They got home just after 7. The soup place had been busy, always was on weekday evenings, but Maya had been patient while they waited, entertaining herself by counting tiles on the floor and making up stories about the other customers. Now she sat at their small kitchen table, carefully spooning chicken noodle soup into her mouth, her legs swinging underneath the chair. Ethan had managed 3 bites of his own soup before his stomach declared victory, and he'd switched to crackers. The donation was hitting harder now. His hands felt cold, his head light, his body screaming for sleep. But he watched Maya eat and felt something like contentment settle over him despite the exhaustion. All done, Maya announced, pushing her empty bowl away with satisfaction. Good job, baby. Bath time? Can I take my mermaid toys? Sure. While Maya splashed in the tub, their bathroom was barely big enough for the tub and toilet, but Maya made it work. Ethan sat on the closed toilet lid and tried not to fall asleep. She was telling an elaborate story about a mermaid princess who could talk to whales, her voice echoing off the tile, utterly unconcerned that her audience was half-conscious. By 8:30, Maya was clean, pajama-clad, and tucked into bed. Ethan read to her. Their current chapter book was Matilda, until her eyes grew heavy and her breathing evened out. He kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and stumbled to the living room. His phone was buzzing. 3 missed calls from the warehouse supervisor. Ethan stared at them, guilt mixing with exhaustion. He should call back, should explain that he'd given blood, that he physically couldn't do a double shift tonight. But the thought of having that conversation, of defending his decision to help a dying child instead of making time and a half, was more than he could handle. He texted instead, "Sorry, had a medical thing. We'll pick up extra shifts next week to make up for it." Then he collapsed onto the pull-out couch without even bothering to unfold it and fell asleep in his clothes before he could second-guess any of the day's choices. He dreamed of blood, dark red against white tile, flowing into bags and tubes, flowing out of small bodies that wouldn't stop bleeding. He dreamed of Celeste Harrington's bare feet and wild eyes, of Ava seizing in her mother's arms, of Maya small and sick in a hospital bed while he stood helpless, unable to give her anything that would save her. He woke at 3 a.m. with his heart pounding and his mouth dry as dust. For a disoriented moment, he didn't know where he was or what was wrong. Then it came back. The donation, the exhaustion, the day that felt like it had lasted a week. Ethan dragged himself to the kitchen and drank 2 full glasses of water, remembering Jenny's instructions. Food, water, sleep. He was failing at 2 out of 3. He made himself eat a banana and some peanut butter straight from the jar, his body protesting but accepting the fuel. Then he checked on Maya, still sleeping peacefully, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, and returned to the couch. This time when he lay down, his phone was on the cushion next to him. He picked it up and, against his better judgment, Googled Celeste Harrington daughter emergency. Nothing yet. Too soon for news to leak. But there were plenty of other articles about Celeste, business profiles, interviews, a puff piece from last year about women changing Columbus. In all of them, she looked exactly like she had that morning, polished, powerful, utterly in control. Nothing like the woman who'd stood barefoot in the donation center, falling apart. Ethan closed the browser and set the phone down. It wasn't his business. He'd helped. He'd given blood. He'd done what he could. Whatever happened next was for Celeste and her daughter and the team of doctors fighting to save Ava's life. His part was done. But as he drifted back to sleep, he kept seeing Celeste's face when she'd recognized him in the donation center, that complicated expression of horror and shame and desperate gratitude. Kept hearing her broken voice. "I don't understand why you would help me." Because that's what people did, Ethan thought in the hazy space between waking and sleeping. When someone needed help, you helped them. Even if they'd been cruel. Even if they'd treated you like nothing. You helped because not helping meant becoming the kind of person who turned away from a dying child, and Ethan refused to be that person. Maya was his whole world, but she wasn't the whole world. There were other daughters, other parents, other families held together by love and luck and the kindness of strangers. Today, for Ava Harrington, he'd been that stranger. Tomorrow, maybe someone would be that stranger for him. That was how the world was supposed to work. That was how you got through it, by believing that when you fell, someone would catch you because you'd been there to catch them. Ethan fell asleep hoping that Celeste Harrington would get the chance to hold her daughter again, hoping that somewhere in this city there were still enough people who believed in catching each other, hoping that his blood, ordinary, unremarkable O-negative from a broke janitor, would be enough to save one small life. Sometimes hope was all you had. Sometimes, if you were lucky, it was enough. Ethan woke to pale morning light filtering through their apartment's thin curtains and the sound of Maya humming in the kitchen. For a moment he lay still, his body cataloging the damage from yesterday. Arms sore where the needle had been, a bone-deep exhaustion that felt like gravity had doubled overnight, and a headache that pulsed dully behind his eyes. 2 units of blood. His body was still trying to figure out what had happened to it. He forced himself upright and found Maya at the table with a bowl of cereal, still in her pajamas, her dark curls sticking up at odd angles. "Morning, Daddy." She looked up at him with those serious eyes. "You slept really late. It's almost 8. 8. Ethan's shift at Alderstone started at 9. He'd overslept by almost 2 hours and his body felt like it had been filled with sand. "I needed the rest, baby. Did you get breakfast okay?" Huh. And I fed Mr. Whiskers." She pointed at the goldfish bowl on the counter, where their 25-cent carnival prize swam in lazy circles. He was hungry. "Good job." Ethan moved to the kitchen and started the coffee maker, his hands clumsy. He needed to call work. Needed to explain that he'd be late, or maybe couldn't come in at all. The thought made his stomach clench with anxiety. He couldn't afford to miss shifts. They were already running so close to the edge that one missed paycheck could send them over. But Jenny's voice echoed in his head. "You can't help your daughter if you end up in an ER bed yourself." His phone rang before he could make the call. Unknown number. Ethan almost didn't answer. Probably a bill collector or spam, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Cross?" A woman's voice, professional and warm. "This is Angela Chen from St. Vincent's Hospital. I'm calling from the donation center. How are you feeling this morning?" "Tired, a little sore. But okay. That's normal after a double donation. I wanted to check in and also let you know that your blood was successfully typed and matched. Both units went directly to the pediatric patient from yesterday's code red." Ava Harrington. Ethan's blood was keeping Ava alive. The reality of it hit him strange and profound. Do you know if she's okay?" There was a pause. "I can't share specific patient information, but I can tell you that she made it through surgery and is currently in intensive care. Your donation made a critical difference, Mr. Cross. I want you to know that." Something tight in Ethan's chest loosened slightly. Made it through surgery. That was something. That was hope. "Thank you for calling," he said quietly. "Of course. And Mr. Cross, please take care of yourself today. Rest, hydrate, eat iron-rich foods. Your body did something extraordinary yesterday. Give it time to recover." After she hung up, Ethan stood in the kitchen holding his phone, Maya watching him with worried eyes. "Was that about the girl?" she asked. "Yeah, she made it through her surgery." "That's good." Maya's face brightened. "So your blood helped?" "Yeah, baby. It helped." Maya nodded, satisfied, and returned to her cereal. For her, the world was still simple enough that problems had solutions and good actions led to good outcomes. Ethan envied that certainty even as he tried to preserve it for her as long as possible. He called Alderstone's cleaning supervisor and explained that he'd had a medical situation yesterday, donated blood, wasn't safe to work today. The supervisor was understanding but firm. Take today, but any more absences this month and they'd have to have a conversation about reliability. Ethan swallowed his pride and thanked him, then called Maya's school to let them know she'd be staying home. He couldn't send her to school and then pass out from exhaustion trying to take care of the apartment, so they had a pajama day. Maya was delighted. School days off were rare treasures. They watched nature documentaries, read books, and played endless rounds of Go Fish. Ethan dozed on and off, his body demanding rest even when his anxiety about missed work kept trying to wake him. By afternoon, he felt marginally more human, and Maya made them sandwiches with the careful concentration of someone entrusted with an important task. "I put extra jelly on yours," she announced, "because you need energy." "Thank you, baby. That's very thoughtful." They were halfway through lunch when someone knocked on the door. Ethan tensed. Unexpected visitors were rarely good news. Bill collectors didn't usually come to the door, but landlords did. So did social workers, occasionally doing wellness checks on single fathers living on the margins. He looked through the peephole and froze. Celeste Harrington stood in his hallway. She looked different in daylight, out of context. She wore dark jeans and a simple gray sweater. Still expensive, Ethan could tell, but not the armor of power she'd worn at Alderstone. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore minimal makeup. She looked exhausted and nervous and completely out of place in his building's dingy hallway. Ethan opened the door part way, blocking the view inside. "Miss Harrington?" "Mr. Cross, I'm sorry to show up unannounced. She stopped, seeming to register his confusion. "The hospital gave me your address. I know that's probably a privacy violation, but I told them I needed to speak with you, and She stopped again, and Ethan realized she was as uncomfortable with this as he was. "May I come in, just for a moment?" Every instinct told Ethan this was a bad idea. You didn't let your boss, even indirectly, into your home. You didn't let powerful people see how you really lived, because that knowledge became leverage. But Celeste looked so genuinely uncertain standing there, and there was something in her face that reminded him of how she'd looked in the hospital waiting room. Stripped of pretense, just a person trying to do the right thing and not sure how. "Okay." Ethan stepped back. "But I've got Maya home today, so of course I won't stay long." Celeste stepped inside and Ethan saw his apartment through her eyes. The worn furniture, the patches on the walls where he'd covered holes with spackle and hope. Maya's artwork everywhere like bright, defiant flags. It was clean but shabby, the home of someone doing their absolute best with almost nothing. Maya looked up from the couch, curious. "Daddy, who's that?" "This is Mrs. Harrington. She's—" Ethan hesitated. Her daughter was the girl at the hospital yesterday. Understanding dawned on Maya's face. She slid off the couch and approached solemnly, the way she did when meeting new adults. "Is your daughter okay?" Celeste's expression softened immediately. "She is, sweetheart. Thanks in part to your dad. You must be Maya. How did you know my name?" "Your dad told me yesterday. He said you were very brave while he donated blood." Maya glanced at Ethan, pride mixing with residual worry. "I read my book, and I didn't cry even though I was scared." "That is brave," Celeste said seriously. "I was scared too." "But your daughter is okay now." "She's getting better. She's still in the hospital, but the doctors say she's going to be fine." Maya nodded, satisfied with this answer. "That's good. Do you want to see my goldfish? His name is Mr. Whiskers." Before Ethan could intervene, Celeste said, "I would love to see your goldfish." Maya led her to the kitchen counter, chattering about Mr. Whiskers' personality and eating habits. Celeste listened with genuine attention, asking questions that made Maya glow with importance. Watching them, Ethan felt something shift in his understanding. This wasn't the CEO from yesterday morning. This was a mother who'd nearly lost her daughter, trying to thank the person who'd helped save her. After a thorough introduction to Mr. Whiskers, Maya returned to her documentary, Something About Penguins, and Celeste turned to Ethan. Her nervousness had returned. "Can we talk? Privately?" Ethan gestured to their tiny kitchen table. They sat across from each other, close enough that their knees almost touched in the cramped space. Celeste folded her hands on the table and seemed to gather herself. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally. "I've thought about what I wanted to say all morning, and nothing sounds right. So I'm just going to be direct." She met his eyes. "Ava is alive because of you. The doctors were clear about that. She lost so much blood that without immediate transfusion, she wouldn't have survived surgery. Your blood, specifically yours, O negative, rushed directly from donation to OR, kept her heart beating while they repaired the damage." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. "I'm glad she's okay." "That's it?" Celeste's voice held a note of frustration. "You saved my daughter's life, and that's—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to thank you, and I don't know how. Money feels insulting. Words feel inadequate. You gave part of yourself to save a child you didn't know, whose mother had treated you terribly, and you did it without hesitation." "She needed help," Ethan said simply. "That's not complicated." "It is to me." Celeste's voice was quiet now. "I've built my entire life on complicated, on strategy and calculation and cost-benefit analysis. And yesterday I watched you do something that defied all of that. You helped when there was no benefit to you, no reason except that a child was dying." She paused. "The hospital told me you gave 2 units, that you specifically asked to give more because they needed it. They did need it. You donated blood knowing you'd be weak, knowing you probably had work that night, knowing you'd sacrifice your own well-being, and you did it anyway for a stranger's child." Celeste's eyes were bright. "I need you to understand how extraordinary that is. Most people wouldn't. I wouldn't have before yesterday. I would have calculated the cost to myself and walked away." "Then yesterday changed you," Ethan said. "That's good." "It did. Celeste stopped, her composure cracking slightly. "When they brought Ava out of surgery and told me she was stable, the surgeon said she'd needed 4 units of blood total. Yours were the first 2, the emergency units that stabilized her enough for them to operate. He said timing was everything. 20 more minutes of blood loss, and they couldn't have saved her." Her voice dropped to a whisper. 20 minutes. That's how close I came to losing her." In the living room, Maya laughed at something on her documentary. The sound seemed to steady Celeste. "I came here to thank you," she continued, "but also to apologize. The way I spoke to you yesterday morning was inexcusable. I was stressed and rushing, and I took it out on you because I could. Because you were there and you couldn't fight back. That's not who I want to be." "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay?" Celeste looked almost offended by his calm acceptance. "That's it? What do you want me to say? That I was hurt? I was. That it was unfair? It was. But you're here now, apologizing, and your daughter almost died yesterday. I'm not going to make you feel worse about something that doesn't matter anymore." "It matters." "Does it?" Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Yesterday morning, you were one person. Yesterday afternoon, you became someone different, because the worst thing that could happen almost happened. People aren't defined by their worst moment. They're defined by what they do after." Celeste stared at him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Anger, maybe. Demands, a speech about how I represent everything wrong with corporate America." She shook her head. "Not this. Not Grace. I'm too tired for anger," Ethan said honestly, "and too busy trying to take care of my own kid to waste energy on grudges." He paused. "How is Ava? Really?" Celeste's face transformed, fear and relief and desperate love all tangled together. "She's in pediatric ICU, stable but critical. The skull fracture required surgery to relieve pressure on her brain, and there was internal bleeding they had to repair. But her brain scans this morning showed normal activity. No permanent damage, they think. She woke up around dawn, asked for water, and recognized me." Her voice broke slightly. "They say she'll make a full recovery." "That's good. That's really good." "Yes." Celeste wiped her eyes quickly. "She has weeks of recovery ahead, but she'll live. She'll be okay. And I owe that to you." "You don't owe me anything." "I disagree." Celeste's voice firmed, and I want to do something for you. Please, let me help somehow. Help with what? I don't know. Whatever you need. Medical bills, Maya's treatment, rent, groceries? No. Ethan's response was immediate and firm. No charity. It's not charity, it's charity. Ethan kept his voice gentle but unyielding. And I appreciate the offer, I do, but I take care of my daughter on my own. That's important to me. Celeste looked frustrated. Why? Why would you refuse help when you clearly need it? Because accepting help from you changes the story, Ethan said. Right now, what happened yesterday was simple. Your daughter needed help. I could help. I did. No debt, no obligation. If you start paying my bills, it becomes a transaction. You saved your daughter by buying mine, and that's not... He stopped, searching for words. That's not what happened. I didn't help Ava, so you'd owe me. I helped because she was a scared kid who needed it. The purity of that matters to me. The purity, Celeste repeated, and something in her expression shifted. Not offense, but something like wonder. You actually mean that? Yeah. They sat in silence for a moment. From the living room came the narrator's voice discussing penguin mating habits, and Maya's delighted response. They're dancing. Your daughter is lovely, Celeste said softly. You're doing a good job with her. Thank you. How long have you been on your own, raising her? Since she was born. Her mother left when Maya was 3 days old. Ethan saw Celeste's shock and continued before she could respond with pity. It's okay. We're okay. It's been hard, but we manage. And her heart condition? Congenital defect. She had surgery when she was 3 to repair it. Now it's just monitoring and medication. As long as we stay on top of it, she should be fine. Ethan didn't mention the cost, the constant anxiety, the way every cardiology appointment made his stomach churn. She's a fighter. Like her father. Ethan shrugged. I do what I have to do. No, Celeste said firmly. You do more than that. You work a job that doesn't appreciate you. You raise a daughter alone. You maintain her medical care, and yesterday you gave blood until you were weak to save a stranger's child. That's not just survival, that's... She stopped, searching for the word. That's heroic. It's just being a decent person. If that's true, then we need more decent people in the world. Celeste leaned forward. Please, if you won't let me help you financially, at least let me do something. There has to be something you need. Ethan thought about it. His first instinct was still refusal. He didn't want to be beholden to Celeste Harrington or anyone else. But there was something genuine in her request, a need to balance some internal ledger, and maybe denying her that was its own kind of cruelty. There is one thing, he said slowly, but it's not for me. What is it? I don't know if you're aware, but Alderstone doesn't offer benefits to contract workers. The cleaning staff, maintenance, food service, we're all employed through third-party companies. No health insurance, no paid sick leave, no parental leave. Ethan met her eyes. I'm managing because I only have one kid and I'm healthy. But I work with people who aren't as lucky. Single parents with multiple kids, older workers with chronic conditions. They're one emergency away from losing everything. Celeste's expression had gone very still. You're asking me to change company policy. I'm asking you to consider whether the people who keep your building running deserve basic protections. But yeah, that probably means changing policy. Ethan paused. You said you don't want to be the person who treats people like tools. Here's your chance to mean it. For a moment, he thought he'd overstepped. Celeste's face was unreadable, her CEO mask sliding back into place. Then she nodded slowly. You're right. I don't know why I never thought about it before. Or maybe I did and it was easier not to act on it. She pulled out her phone and made a note. I'll set up a meeting with HR and our contracting companies next week. I can't promise immediate changes, but I can promise I'll push for them. That's all I'm asking. It's more than I would have done without you asking. Celeste put her phone away. Is that really all you want? Policy changes that might take months? If you actually follow through, it'll change lives, including mine eventually. Ethan smiled slightly. That's worth more than paying my rent for a few months. Celeste studied him with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. You're very good at making me feel small and inspired at the same time. That wasn't my intention. I know, that's what makes it effective. She stood. I should go. I want to get back to the hospital before Ava wakes from her nap. At the doorway, she paused. Thank you, Mr. Cross, for everything. Ethan, if we're past you being Ms. Harrington, I should be Ethan. Ethan, then. She smiled, a real smile, tired and grateful. And I'm Celeste. After she left, Maya appeared at Ethan's elbow. I like her. She's nice. Yeah, she is. Is she really going to help people at your work? I hope so. Maya considered this. Good, because you work really hard and you should have insurance like Dr. Morrison talked about. Ethan pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her small, fierce certainty about justice. You're pretty smart. You know that? I know. Maya hugged him back. Can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Absolutely. That night, after Maya was asleep and Ethan was lying on his pull-out couch feeling marginally more human, his phone buzzed with an email. The subject line read, From Celeste Harrington. He opened it. Ethan, I wanted you to know that I spoke with my assistant tonight and we're moving the policy review meeting to this Friday instead of next week. I also asked her to compile data on how many contract workers we employ across all departments and what it would cost to bring them on as direct employees with full benefits. I don't know if I can convince the board, but I'm going to try. You've given me a lot to think about regarding how we treat the people who make our company function. Thank you for that. And thank you again for Ava. I will never be able to repay that debt, but I'll spend a long time trying. Celeste. Ethan read it twice, then set his phone down. Maybe she'd follow through. Maybe it would all be forgotten once Ava was home and the crisis had faded. But for now, today, Celeste Harrington was trying. That was something. He thought about Ava in her hospital bed, about Maya sleeping safely down the hall, about all the fragile children in the world held together by love and luck and medical intervention. He thought about how easily everything could fall apart and how sometimes, not always, but sometimes, people caught each other before the fall. Tomorrow, he'd go back to work. Back to being invisible in the marble lobby, back to scrubbing floors and emptying trash and swallowing his pride. But maybe things would be different. Maybe Celeste would remember what it felt like to be powerless. Maybe she'd use her power differently. Or maybe nothing would change, and that would have to be okay too. Because Ethan hadn't helped Ava to get something in return. He'd helped because that's what you did when someone needed it. The rest was up to Celeste Harrington and her conscience. Ethan closed his eyes and let exhaustion pull him under, his last thought before sleep. She made it through surgery. That little girl is alive. Sometimes that was all the victory you got. Sometimes it was enough. The week that followed passed in a strange blur. Ethan returned to work Thursday night, still feeling weak but functional, and found that news of what he'd done had somehow spread through the building. People he'd never spoken to nodded at him in hallways. A maintenance worker named Carlos shook his hand and said, "That was a good thing you did, man." The security guard at the night desk, Frank, who Ethan had greeted for 18 months without ever getting more than a grunt in return, started asking about Maya's health, remembering her name. It was uncomfortable and touching in equal measure. Ethan didn't want attention for doing what felt like basic human decency, but he also couldn't help but notice how the quality of his invisibility had changed. He was still a janitor in a building full of people who made more money in a week than he did in 6 months, but now he was a person, not furniture. That shift mattered more than he'd expected. Friday afternoon, his evening off, his phone rang while he was helping Maya with her homework. Mrs. Chen had agreed to watch Maya that evening. Ethan had picked up a rare weekend day shift at the warehouse to make up for the missed Tuesday. The number was St. Vincent's Hospital. "Mr. Cross, this is Dr. Morrison from Pediatric Cardiology." Ethan's heart lurched. "Is Maya okay? Did something show up on her last—" No, Maya's fine. I'm actually calling about something else." Dr. Morrison's voice was warm. "I heard about what you did during the Code Red on Tuesday. Donated 2 units for the Harrington girl." "Oh, yes. That was remarkable. I wanted you to know that word's gotten around the pediatric wing, and several of us wanted to say thank you. We lose too many kids to circumstances beyond our control. It means everything when someone steps up like you did. I did what I could, which is more than most people do. Dr. Morrison paused. I also wanted to mention that if you're interested, the hospital is always looking for regular blood donors. O negative, especially. We could set you up on a schedule that works for you, make sure you're properly compensated for your time, and provided with nutrition support. Compensated? It's not much, $50 per standard donation, which you can do every 8 weeks. But for someone like you who's willing to help, it could provide a steady supplement. $50 every 8 weeks was $400 a year. That was Maya's medication copays for several months. That was breathing room. I'd like that, Ethan said. Yes, let me know when and I'll be there. After he hung up, Maya looked up from her math worksheet. Are you going to give blood again? Looks like it. Good. She returned to her work with absolute confidence that her father was doing the right thing. You're good at helping people. Saturday morning, Ethan was halfway through his warehouse shift, stacking boxes, loading pallets, the mindless physical labor that his body understood even when his brain was tired, when his supervisor approached looking uncomfortable. Cross, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important. Ethan couldn't imagine who would show up at the warehouse looking for him. Did they say what it's about? No, but she looks like she means business. Rich lady in a nice car. She's waiting in the lot. Something in Ethan's stomach dropped. He clocked out for his break and headed outside, and sure enough, there was Celeste's sleek black Mercedes parked near the entrance. She stood beside it wearing slacks and a blazer, looking severely out of place among the shipping containers and loading docks. Celeste, Ethan approached slowly. Is everything okay? Is Ava... Ava's fine. Better every day. Celeste looked almost embarrassed. I'm sorry to show up at your work. I tried calling, but it went to voicemail, and I wanted to tell you something in person, okay? I met with the board yesterday. Presented the proposal for bringing contract workers on as direct employees with full benefits. She paused, and Ethan braced himself for disappointment. They approved it. Starting next quarter, all contract workers at Alderstone who've been with their companies for more than 6 months will be offered direct employment, health insurance, paid sick leave, parental leave, retirement benefits, everything. Ethan stared at her. You're serious. Completely serious. It's going to cost the company significant money, and 3 board members voted against it. But I made it clear that this was non-negotiable for me as CEO. That what happened Tuesday made me realize we've been building our success on the backs of people we refused to take care of, and that had to change. Celeste's voice was firm. You were right. The people who keep our building running deserve basic protections, and now they'll have them. The magnitude of it hit Ethan all at once. Health insurance for Maya, sick days he could actually take, a retirement account, even if it would be years before it amounted to anything significant, security that had seemed impossible 3 days ago. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it when the offer comes. Say you'll keep pushing me to be better. Celeste smiled slightly. Say you'll forgive me for being the kind of person who needed a crisis to see what was right in front of me. There's nothing to forgive. I think there is, but I'll accept the grace if you're offering it. She pulled an envelope from her blazer. There's something else. This is for you personally. Ethan took the envelope warily. Inside was a check. He looked at the amount and felt his vision blur. $10,000. I can't accept this. His voice came out rough. It's not charity, Celeste said quickly. It's payment for what you gave. The hospital blood bank has a program for rare-type emergency donors. They compensate based on urgency and volume. I made a donation to that program in your name. This is their payment to you for the 2 units you provided during a code red emergency. The hospital doesn't pay $10,000 for 2 pints of blood. No, but I do. Celeste's voice was steady. You saved my daughter's life, Ethan. I'm a billionaire. This amount means nothing to my wealth and everything to your situation. Please, let me give you this one thing, not as debt, but as a mother thanking the man who kept her child alive. Ethan looked at the check. $10,000 would cover months of expenses. would give them an actual emergency fund, would mean he could take Maya to the zoo or the movies without calculating the cost of every ticket and snack. "If I take this, we're even," he said finally. "Completely even. No more showing up at my jobs, no more guilt, no more debt. Deal. And you follow through on the benefits policy. That matters more than this check." "I will. I swear." Celeste extended her hand. "Even?" Ethan shook it. "Even." After she drove away, Ethan stood in the warehouse parking lot holding a check that represented more money than he'd held at once in his entire life. His hands were shaking. He thought about calling Maya, calling Mrs. Chen, calling someone to share this moment of impossible fortune. Instead, he went back inside, finished his shift, and stopped at the bank on his way home to deposit the check before he could second-guess accepting it. That night, after Maya was asleep, he sat at their kitchen table and made a list. First priority, establish savings account. Put half the money away for emergencies. Second, pay off the highest interest medical debt. Third, buy Maya new shoes that actually fit and maybe take her somewhere special. Fourth, let himself breathe for the first time in 6 years. The list sat in front of him, and Ethan felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter and deeper than that. Relief, maybe. Or hope. The sense that the impossible tightrope he'd been walking had finally gotten just slightly wider, just slightly easier to navigate. He thought about Ava Harrington, recovering in her hospital bed. About Celeste, learning to be the kind of leader who saw the people beneath her notice. About Maya, sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware that her father had just been handed a future that felt a little less terrifying. Sometimes you gave blood and saved a life. Sometimes that life belonged to someone powerful enough to change other lives in return. The mathematics of kindness didn't always balance, but sometimes, rarely, miraculously, they did. Ethan folded the list and set it aside. Tomorrow he'd start planning. Tonight he'd just sit here in his shabby kitchen and let himself feel what it was like when the world gave back instead of just taking. It felt like grace, like mercy, like maybe things could actually be okay. For tonight, that was enough. The following Tuesday, Ethan reported to Alderstone Industries for what he assumed would be another ordinary night shift. The check from Celeste had cleared. He'd verified it 3 times, half convinced the bank would call and tell him there'd been a mistake, and he'd already moved half into savings and paid off 2 of Maya's smaller medical bills. The relief of watching those balances drop to 0 had been so intense he'd actually had to sit down for a minute in the bank parking lot, overwhelmed by the simple absence of that particular weight. But he was still a janitor, still had floors to clean and trash to empty. The money changed his future, not his present, and he was grateful for the work even as his body reminded him it was still recovering from the blood donation. He felt stronger than last week, but not quite whole yet, a lingering tiredness that sat in his bones like old weather. He clocked in at the basement employee entrance and was immediately intercepted by his supervisor, Marcus, who looked uncomfortable in a way that made Ethan's stomach tighten. "Cross, they need you upstairs in HR before you start your shift." "HR? Why?" Ethan's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Had someone complained about his work? Had they found out about the warehouse job and decided it was a conflict? Was this about the media attention the blood donation was starting to generate? There'd been a small piece in the Columbus Dispatch about the Code Red that had mentioned him by name. "Didn't say. Just told me to send you up soon as you got here." Marcus shrugged apologetically. "Conference room C on the 15th floor. They're waiting for you." The 15th floor was executive territory. Ethan had cleaned those offices for 18 months, but had never been summoned there as anything other than invisible support staff. He took the elevator up, not the executive elevator where Celeste had berated him, but the regular one, and emerged into a hallway of polished wood and understated wealth. Conference room C had glass walls and a view of downtown Columbus glittering in the October darkness. Inside, 3 people waited at the long table. Ethan recognized Susan Park, Alderstone's head of HR, from company emails. The other 2 were strangers, a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit, and a younger woman with a tablet and the efficient air of an executive assistant. "Mr. Cross, thank you for coming up." Susan stood and gestured to a chair. "Please, have a seat. This won't take long." Ethan sat, his janitor's uniform feeling like a costume in this room, designed for people who made decisions that moved millions of dollars. Is there a problem? Quite the opposite. Susan smiled, but there was something careful in her expression. I'm sure you've heard that Alderstone is implementing significant policy changes regarding our contract workforce. We're transitioning to direct employment for qualified personnel. I heard something about that, yes. Ethan kept his voice neutral, not sure if he was supposed to know the details or if Celeste's visit to the warehouse was meant to be private. Well, as part of that transition, we've been reviewing personnel files for all contract workers to determine who qualifies for direct employment offers. Susan opened a folder. Your file is quite interesting, Mr. Cross. Here it comes, Ethan thought. Whatever he'd done wrong, whatever technicality would disqualify him from the benefits he'd suggested to Celeste in the first place. You attended Ohio State University, Susan continued, mechanical engineering program. You completed 3 years with a 3.8 GPA before taking a leave of absence 6 years ago. You never formally withdrew or graduated. Ethan's throat went dry. I had personal circumstances that required leaving school. Your daughter was born, medical complications. Susan's voice was kind but professional. I understand. And I see you've been working with our contract cleaning company for 18 months. Excellent performance reviews. Never missed a shift until last week, and even then it was for a medical donation that saved a child's life. She paused. You're significantly overqualified for your current position. I needed work that had flexibility for my daughter's medical appointments. The cleaning job provided that. Of course. Susan exchanged glances with the man in the suit, who nodded slightly. Mr. Cross, how would you feel about finishing your degree? The question was so unexpected that Ethan actually blinked. I'm sorry? Alderstone Industries has a workforce development program, the suited man said, speaking for the first time. His voice was cultured, East Coast accent. I'm Richard Vance, Chief Operating Officer. The program offers educational support to employees who want to complete degrees or certifications relevant to their career development. We cover tuition, provide flexible scheduling, and guarantee position security during the coursework. Ethan stared at him. I'm a janitor. You're a contract custodial worker currently, Susan corrected gently. But if you accept our offer of direct employment, you'd be an Alderstone employee eligible for all company programs, including education benefits. And your background suggests you could be valuable to our engineering department once you complete your degree, Richard added. We're always looking for talented people who understand how systems work from the ground up. Someone who's literally been in the building's infrastructure has perspective our current engineers lack. This felt like a dream or a trap. Ethan couldn't tell which. I don't understand why you're offering this. Susan's careful expression finally cracked into something genuine. To be completely honest, Mr. Cross, Ms. Harrington personally flagged your file. She didn't tell us what to do. She never does. But she asked us to review your qualifications carefully and ensure you were aware of all available opportunities. When we saw your academic history and work record, the education program seemed like an obvious fit. Of course, Celeste. Even after their agreement to be even, she was still trying to help. Ethan felt something complicated twist in his chest, gratitude and irritation and disbelief all tangled together. The offer is completely legitimate, Richard said, reading Ethan's skepticism. You'd still work part-time while attending classes, but on a schedule built around your coursework. The pay would actually increase, union scale for skilled positions, and you'd have full benefits starting January 1st. All we'd need is your commitment to complete the degree and consider internal opportunities once you graduate. Consider, not accept, Susan clarified. If you finish your degree and want to take a job elsewhere, that's your right. We're investing in you as a person, not buying an obligation. Ethan looked down at his hands, rough from 18 months of industrial cleaning, chemicals, and physical labor. Looked at the conference room with its view of the city he'd only ever seen from the ground level. Thought about Maya and what it would mean to tell her that Daddy was going back to school, that he'd be an engineer like he'd always dreamed, that their future could be something bigger than survival. Can I think about it? Of course, Susan said. Take a few days, but we do need an answer by Friday if you want to start spring semester. That gives you 4 months to transition and get enrolled. Friday. Okay. Ethan stood, his legs uncertain beneath him. Thank you. Thank you. Richard stood as well and extended his hand. We're grateful for what you did for Ms. Harrington's daughter. But this offer isn't charity or repayment. It's recognition of your potential. Don't forget that. Ethan shook his hand and left the conference room in a daze. He'd expected to spend the night scrubbing floors. Instead, he was being offered his future back, gift-wrapped in corporate policy and Celeste Harrington's guilty conscience. He should be thrilled. He was thrilled. But underneath the excitement was a current of fear so strong it threatened to pull him under. What if he couldn't handle school and work and parenting? What if he failed, proved that he was actually just a janitor playing at being more? What if accepting help was the first step toward losing the hard-won independence he'd built? His phone buzzed. A text from Celeste. Susan said you came in. I hope they explained everything clearly. This is real, Ethan. You earned it. Take the chance. He stared at the message for a long moment, then pocketed his phone without responding. He needed to think. Needed to talk to Maya. Needed to figure out if he was brave enough to reach for something better, or if he'd become too comfortable with survival to risk anything more. The night shift passed in a blur of automatic motion, mop and bucket, empty bins, wiped surfaces. His body knew the work well enough that his mind could wander, spinning through possibilities and fears in equal measure. By the time dawn broke and his shift ended, Ethan had made a decision. Or rather, he'd realized the decision had already been made the moment Richard Vance had said the words, "Finish your degree." He was going to say yes. He was terrified and doubtful and certain he'd fail, but he was going to say yes anyway, because Maya deserved a father who tried, not one who let fear win. Mrs. Chen was delighted when he told her over breakfast at her apartment, Maya still half asleep against his shoulder. I knew you had more in you than pushing a mop. Oh, this is wonderful, Ethan. Your parents would be so proud. Ethan's parents had died in a car accident when he was 19, one of the reasons he'd ended up navigating fatherhood without a roadmap. Mrs. Chen was the closest thing to family he had besides Maya, and her approval meant more than he'd expected. It's going to be hard, he warned. School and work and Maya. I'll need more help with childcare. So I'll help more. That girl is my granddaughter and everything but blood. You think I'd let you struggle alone? Mrs. Chen patted his hand. You take this chance, Ethan Cross. You grab it with both hands and you don't let go. Maya stirred against him, blinking awake. Are we talking about the school thing? You were listening? Ethan asked. A little bit before I fell asleep. Maya sat up, her hair a wild halo. Are you going to be an engineer like you wanted? Maybe. If I go back to school and work really hard, will you still have time for me? The question hit Ethan in the chest. Always, baby. You're my number one priority. That never changes. Okay. Maya considered this with her usual seriousness. Then you should do it, because you're really smart and you should get to use your smartness for more than cleaning. Cleaning is honest work, Ethan said, because he needed her to understand that. I know, but you always look sad when you come home from there. Maybe engineer work will make you look happy instead. Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds came truths that adults spent years avoiding. Ethan pulled Maya close and kissed the top of her head, overwhelmed by how clearly she saw him. Okay, he said into her curls. I'll do it. On Wednesday morning, Ethan called Susan Park and accepted the position. The paperwork was extensive: benefits enrollment, education program applications, union registration, background checks that would have been terrifying if he'd had anything to hide. By Friday, he had an official offer letter, a starting date of January 2nd, and an appointment with an academic advisor at Ohio State for the following week. Things were moving so fast that Ethan barely had time to process each step before the next one arrived. It felt like being caught in a current, exhilarating and terrifying and completely beyond his control. All he could do was swim as hard as he could and hope the current was carrying him somewhere good. Saturday afternoon, Ethan was at the apartment helping Maya with an art project when his phone rang. Celeste's name on the caller ID made his stomach flip. Ethan, I hope I'm not interrupting. No, it's fine. We're just making a volcano out of paper mache. That sounds messy and wonderful. There was a smile in Celeste's voice. I'm calling because Ava is being discharged this afternoon. She's recovered enough to continue treatment at home, and she's been asking about something. What's that? She wants to meet the man who helped her. The doctors told her about what happened, carefully, age-appropriately, and she knows someone gave blood that saved her life. She knows it was you. Celeste paused. I told her I'd ask if you'd be willing to visit. No pressure, and I understand if it's too strange or if you're not comfortable, but she's been asking every day, and I thought, yes, Ethan interrupted, I'd like to meet her too. Really? Really? When? They arranged for Sunday afternoon at Celeste's home. Ethan hung up and found Maya watching him with bright, curious eyes. Was that the lady whose daughter you helped? Yeah, she wants me to meet Ava. Can I come too? Ethan hesitated. Bringing Maya felt like crossing some line, merging two parts of his life that should stay separate. But Maya was looking at him with such hope, and he realized she'd been part of this story from the beginning, waiting in the hospital, being brave while he donated, understanding in her 6-year-old way that sometimes you helped people just because you could. I'll ask, he promised. Celeste's response came via text minutes later. Please bring Maya. Ava would love to meet her. They're the same age, might even go to the same school. Sunday arrived cold and bright, October showing its teeth. Ethan dressed Maya in her nicest outfit, a blue dress that Mrs. Chen had bought her for school pictures, and himself in khakis and a button-down that he usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. They took the bus to Upper Arlington, Columbus's wealthy suburb, and walked 3 blocks to the address Celeste had provided. The house was exactly what Ethan expected, and nothing he was prepared for. Not a mansion, but close. A sprawling modern design with floor-to-ceiling windows and a yard that could have held his entire apartment building. The driveway held 3 cars, including the Mercedes he recognized. Daddy, this is fancy, Maya whispered, her hand tight in his. Yeah, baby, it is. But they're just people, okay? Same as us. Maya nodded, but her eyes were huge as they approached the front door. Before Ethan could knock, it swung open, and Celeste stood there wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. Ethan, Maya, come in, please. The interior was beautiful in that carefully designed way that looked effortless, but probably cost more than Ethan made in a year. Hardwood floors, minimalist furniture, abstract art that Ethan suspected was the real thing. But there were also signs of life. A backpack by the stairs, children's drawings on the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway. A half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. Ava's in the living room, Celeste said. She's excited but also nervous. She doesn't remember much from the hospital, just fragments. But she knows you helped her, and she's been practicing what to say to you all morning. They found Ava curled up on a large sectional sofa, a blanket over her lap, and a stuffed elephant clutched to her chest. She was small for 7, with dark hair like her mother's and the kind of fragility that came from recent illness. A healing surgical scar traced along her hairline, partially hidden by careful styling. She looked up when they entered, and her eyes, gray like Celeste's but warmer, went wide. That's him? She whispered to her mother. That's Ethan, Celeste confirmed. And this is his daughter, Maya. Hi, Ava said shyly. Hi, Maya responded, equally shy. Ethan crossed to the sofa and crouched down so he was at Ava's eye level. Hey, Ava, I'm really glad you're feeling better. My mom said you gave me your blood. That's why I'm not dead. Ava's voice was matter-of-fact in the way children approached big topics. Is that true? I gave blood that the doctors used to help you, yes. But they're the ones who saved you. I just helped. But if you didn't help, I'd be dead, Ava persisted. That's what the doctors said. They said I needed special blood fast, and you gave it to me even though you didn't know me. That's true. Why? It was the same question Celeste had asked in different words. Why help when there was no benefit, no connection, no reason except basic humanity? Because you needed it, Ethan said simply, and I could give it. That's enough reason. Ava studied him for a long moment with those 2 old eyes, the eyes of a child who'd looked at death and understood it. Then she set down her elephant and held out her hand. Thank you for saving me,
she said formally. I'm glad you were there. Ethan shook her small hand gently, careful of the IV bruises still visible on her wrist.
I'm glad I could help. Mom says you have a daughter my age. I do. This is Maya. Ava turned her attention to Maya, and something shifted in her expression, the formality dropping away as she saw another little girl instead of an adult. Do you go to Barrington Elementary? I go to Riverside, Maya said. That's the public school. Oh, I go to private school, but I don't like it very much. The kids are mean sometimes. Ava looked at the stuffed elephant, then back at Maya. Do you want to see my room? I have a really good art setup. Maya looked at Ethan for permission. He nodded, and the two girls disappeared upstairs with the casual speed of children making friends, their earlier shyness forgotten. Celeste watched them go with a soft expression. I can't believe how quickly kids do that. 2 minutes and they're best friends. Yeah. Ethan stood, his knees protesting the crouch. She seems good, Ava, considering everything. She's resilient, more than I gave her credit for. Celeste gestured to the kitchen. Coffee? I need to keep an ear out in case she overdoes it, but we can talk for a bit. The kitchen was all marble and stainless steel, the kind of space where actual chefs probably worked during dinner parties. Celeste made coffee with an espresso machine that looked like it belonged in a cafe, and they sat at the island while autumn sunlight poured through the windows. Susan said you accepted the position, Celeste said, and the education program. I did. Thank you for that, for flagging my file or whatever you did. I didn't do anything except make sure they looked at you as a whole person instead of just a job title. The qualifications are yours. The opportunity you earned. Celeste sipped her coffee. Are you nervous about going back to school? Terrified, Ethan admitted. It's been 6 years. I barely remember calculus. And trying to balance classes with work and Maya, I don't know if I can pull it off. You'll pull it off because you have to. That's how you operate. Celeste's voice was certain. I've been watching you since Tuesday. Not in a creepy way, she added quickly, but I've been paying attention to the people who work in the building, actually looking at them. And I see how hard everyone works, but you have this determination that's different, like you're always carrying something heavy, but you'd never think to put it down. Maya, Ethan said. I'm carrying Maya. I know, and that's what's going to get you through school, because you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for her. I'm doing it for both of us. Even better. Celeste set down her coffee. I want to help. I know we said we were even, but this is different. Let me set up a scholarship through the company. We're establishing an education fund for employees anyway. Might as well make sure you're covered. Celeste, I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you that the tuition is handled. You focus on the coursework and taking care of Maya. Don't let money be the thing that stops you. Her voice was firm, the CEO tone creeping back in. Consider it an investment. You finish your degree, you come work for Alderstone in engineering, and eventually you'll be worth far more to the company than whatever we spend on your education. It's good business. Is that what you tell yourself to justify the guilt? Celeste's eyes flashed, but there was humor in it. Among other things, will you accept the help or do I need to make it a condition of employment? You can't do that. Watch me. They stared at each other across the marble island, and then Ethan started laughing. He couldn't help it. The absurdity of sitting in a kitchen worth more than his entire life, arguing with a billionaire who wanted to pay for his education because he'd saved her daughter. It was too much. Celeste smiled, pleased with herself. Is that a yes? That's a yes, but only because I think you actually would make it a condition of employment and I'd end up accepting anyway. Smart man. Upstairs, they heard the girls laughing. Ethan glanced toward the sound, and his chest tightened with something he couldn't quite name. Maya had friends at school, but they were playground friends, surface connections. This felt different. Ava understood what it was like to live with medical uncertainty, to be small and fragile and fighting to be normal. They had common ground that went deeper than shared homework assignments. They sound good together, Celeste said softly, following his gaze. Ava hasn't laughed like that since before the accident. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? Undiagnosed cerebral aneurysm. It ruptured while we were at the hospital for a completely unrelated appointment. The doctor said it was pure luck we were already there. 5 more minutes without treatment, and she'd have been gone. Celeste's voice went rough. Apparently she'd been having headaches for weeks, but she never complained, just kept saying she was fine when I asked. I should have pushed harder, should have known. You can't know what you can't see, Ethan interrupted gently. Kids are good at hiding things they think will worry their parents. Maya does it too. It's not your fault. My head knows that. My heart is taking longer to accept it. Celeste rubbed her eyes. I keep thinking about that morning, how I yelled at you over nothing, how I was so focused on my schedule and my importance that I treated you like you were... We've been over this. It's done. I know, but I can't stop thinking about it. Because if I hadn't been in that lobby, if you hadn't been there working, if any single thing had been different... She stopped. You saved her, Ethan. Not just with the blood. You caught her when she fell. You kept her breathing. The doctors were clear that your actions in those first few minutes were the difference between life and death. I did what anyone would do. Stop saying that, Celeste said with sudden intensity. Stop diminishing it. What you did was extraordinary. Own it. Be proud of it. You saved my daughter's life with your bare hands and your blood and your refusal to walk away when it would have been easier. That's heroism, Ethan. That's... Her voice broke. That's everything. Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd never thought of himself as heroic. He was just a father trying to keep his own daughter alive who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time for someone else's daughter. But Celeste was looking at him like he'd done something impossible, and maybe for her, for someone who'd spent her life measuring worth in dollars and power, simple human kindness was impossible. Maybe that was the tragedy. I'm glad I was there, he said finally. I'm glad Ava is okay. That's enough for me. Celeste nodded and wiped her eyes quickly. You're a good man, Ethan Cross. Better than most people I know. I'm just trying to be the kind of person Maya can be proud of. She already is proud of you. That's obvious in the way she looks at you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking coffee while the October sunlight shifted across the kitchen. Upstairs, the girls were playing some complicated game that involved a lot of dramatic narration and sound effects. Normal kid sounds. Happy sounds. I should probably check on them, Celeste said. Make sure Ava isn't overdoing it. She's supposed to be resting, but she's terrible at sitting still. They went upstairs together and found the girls in Ava's room, which was bigger than Ethan's entire apartment, sprawled on the floor with markers and poster board, creating what appeared to be a map of an elaborate fantasy kingdom. This is the Crystal Mountains, Ava was explaining, drawing jagged peaks, and this is where the Dragon Queen lives. She's not evil, she's just misunderstood. And this is the village where the brave knight comes from, Maya added, sketching tiny houses. The knight is a girl because girls can be knights too. Obviously, Ava agreed. Celeste caught Ethan's eye and smiled. They backed out of the room quietly, leaving the girls to their world building. I don't think Maya wants to leave anytime soon, Ethan said, and Ava would keep her here all day if she could. Give them another hour. Celeste checked her watch. I can order lunch. Thai food okay? You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Please let me feed you lunch, Ethan. It's the least I can do. So they ordered Thai food, too much of it, enough to feed 6 people, and ate in the kitchen while the girls continued their game upstairs. Celeste asked about Maya's heart condition, and Ethan found himself explaining the diagnosis, the surgery, the ongoing treatment with the detail he usually reserved for doctors. It felt strange to talk about it openly with someone who wasn't family or medical staff, but Celeste listened with genuine interest and asked smart questions that showed she was actually trying to understand. It sounds terrifying, she said, living with that uncertainty. You get used to it. Not comfortable exactly, but you learn to function with the fear in the background. Is that what it was like when you donated blood? Functioning with fear? Ethan considered. More like functioning despite fear. I was afraid I'd pass out or get too weak to work. But I was more afraid of what would happen if I didn't help, of living with the knowledge that I could have saved a child and chose not to. That's what I mean about heroism, Celeste said quietly. You chose the hard thing because it was the right thing. Most people don't do that. Most people don't have to. They're not put in that position. Maybe, Or maybe most people find ways to avoid being put in that position so they never have to make the choice. They were interrupted by the girls thundering down the stairs, flushed and happy. "Mom, can Maya come over next weekend too?" Ava asked. "We need more time to finish our kingdom." "That's up to Maya's dad and to Maya." Both girls turned pleading eyes on Ethan. He looked at Maya's bright, eager face and felt his heart crack open. When was the last time she'd been this excited about a play date? When had she last had a friend who she connected with so immediately? "Next Saturday works," he heard himself say. "If it's okay with your mom." "More than okay," Celeste said. "Ava needs friends outside her school, kids who aren't—" She stopped, clearly not wanting to insult anyone in front of the children. "Kids who share her interests." The girls celebrated with a complicated handshake they'd apparently invented upstairs. Then Maya announced she needed to use the bathroom. Ava led her down the hall, leaving Ethan and Celeste alone again. "Thank you for this," Celeste said, "for bringing Maya, for letting them be friends. Ava's been lonely since the accident. She's afraid of the other kids seeing her differently now, but Maya just sees another kid who likes dragons and art." "Maya's been lonely too. Being sick isolates you even when you're trying to be normal." Ethan glanced toward the hallway. "Maybe they can help each other. Maybe we all can." There was something in Celeste's voice that made Ethan look at her more carefully. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with something else. Something that made him suddenly aware that they were standing very close in her expensive kitchen, that she was beautiful when she wasn't wearing her CEO armor, that the life he was building and the life she'd always known were separated by more than just money. "We should go," he said, more abruptly than he meant to. "Maya has homework and I have to prep for my meeting with the academic advisor tomorrow." If Celeste noticed his sudden retreat, she didn't comment. "Of course. Let me get you both some leftovers to take home." By the time they left, Ethan was carrying enough Thai food to feed them for 3 days, and Maya was clutching a drawing Ava had made for her, a detailed illustration of the Dragon Queen from their imaginary kingdom. On the bus ride home, Maya talked non-stop about Ava's room and her art supplies, and how they were going to write a whole story about their fantasy world together. Ethan listened and made appropriate responses, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about Celeste's kitchen and the way she'd looked at him, and the terrifying feeling that his carefully controlled life was starting to shift in ways he hadn't anticipated and couldn't control. He'd saved Ava's life, and that had led to a job opportunity, and that had led to today. And where did it end? How far would this connection stretch before it either broke or became something he didn't recognize? "Daddy, are you listening?" Maya tugged his sleeve. "Sorry, baby. What did you say?" "I said I really like Ava. Can she be my best friend?" "If she wants to be, you'll have to ask her." "I will next week." Maya settled against his side, content. "Today was really good, Daddy. Thank you for taking me." "You're welcome, sweetheart." The bus rolled through Columbus as evening fell, carrying them back to their small apartment and their small life that was somehow, impossibly, starting to feel like it might become something more. Ethan held his daughter close and tried not to think too hard about what that meant, or what he was risking by letting Celeste Harrington and her daughter into their carefully guarded world. Sometimes you saved someone's life, and that was the end of the story. Sometimes it was just the beginning. Ethan was starting to suspect they were living the beginning of something he didn't have a map for. All he could do was hold on tight and hope they didn't lose themselves in whatever came next. The academic advisor at Ohio State was a woman in her 40s named Dr. Patricia Coleman, who looked at Ethan's transcript with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for archaeological artifacts. They sat in her cramped office surrounded by filing cabinets and motivational posters about perseverance, and Ethan tried not to fidget like the college kid he used to be. "Your GPA is excellent," Dr. Coleman said finally, "and most of your core requirements are complete. You'd need approximately 42 credit hours to finish the degree, 3 semesters if you go full-time, but given your work situation, I'd recommend spreading it over 4 semesters part-time. 2 classes per semester, some online options to give you flexibility. 4 semesters. That's 2 years. 2 years to completely change your career trajectory and earning potential. That's not bad, Mr. Cross." She pulled up a planning worksheet on her computer. "Let's talk about your schedule. You mentioned you have a 6-year-old daughter and you'll be working part-time. What does that look like? They spent the next hour mapping out a plan that felt simultaneously impossible and inevitable. Evening classes twice a week, online coursework on his own schedule, a reduced work schedule at Alderstone that would still provide enough income with the benefits package. It would mean less sleep, less free time, and asking Mrs. Chen to watch Maya even more than she already did. It would mean sacrificing what little margin his life currently had for 2 solid years of grinding toward a finish line he could barely see. It's doable, Dr. Coleman said when they were done. Difficult, but doable. You'll need discipline and support and probably more coffee than is medically advisable. But I've seen people in harder situations succeed. The question is whether you're committed. I'm committed, Ethan said, and meant it with every exhausted fiber of his being. He registered for spring semester classes that day, Thermodynamics 2 and Engineering Materials, both with evening sections that wouldn't conflict with his new work schedule. Walking out of the engineering building into the November cold, Ethan felt like he'd just signed a contract written in his own blood. There was no backing out now. He'd made promises to Susan Park, to Celeste, to himself, but most importantly to Maya. He had to see this through. The following Saturday, he took Maya back to Celeste's house as promised. This time felt easier, less like crossing into foreign territory and more like visiting people they actually knew. Ava was waiting at the window and threw open the door before they'd even reached it, practically vibrating with excitement. "Maya, I finished the Dragon Queen's castle. Come see." The girls disappeared upstairs in a blur of energy, leaving Ethan alone with Celeste in the foyer. She was dressed casually again, leggings and an oversized sweater, and her hair was in a messy bun. She looked tired but content, more relaxed than the brittle perfectionist from that first morning at Alderstone. "Coffee?" she offered. "Always." They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over coffee these past 2 weeks. Celeste would ask about school preparations, and Ethan would ask about Ava's recovery, and they'd talk around the elephant in the room, that their daughters were becoming genuine friends, and that meant their own lives were becoming increasingly entangled in ways neither of them had planned for. Today, though, Celeste seemed distracted. She made the coffee in silence, and when they sat at the island, she turned her cup in her hands without drinking. "I have to tell you something," she said finally, "and I want you to hear it from me before you hear it anywhere else." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Okay." The board met yesterday. We finalized the details of the employment transition program, bringing all the contract workers on as direct employees. It's a major policy shift, bigger than anyone initially realized. We're talking about almost 300 people across all departments. She paused. The announcement goes public Monday. There's going to be media coverage, business journals, local news, maybe even national press, because it's unusual for a company our size to voluntarily increase labor costs this significantly. That's good, right? That's what you wanted. It is. But Ethan, your story is part of it. Not by name if you don't want, but the narrative of why I pushed for this change. It starts with what happened with Ava. With you. Celeste met his eyes. The PR team wants to frame it as a CEO having a moment of clarity about corporate responsibility after a personal crisis. They want to do interviews, profiles, maybe even a feature in Forbes about leadership in humanity and business. And they want to talk about the janitor who saved your daughter. They want the story. I told them I wouldn't give them your name or any details without your explicit permission. But I also told them I wouldn't lie about what catalyzed the change. You did that. Your actions, your words, your... She stopped. Your decency is the reason 300 people are getting health care and job security. That matters. Ethan thought about being in the news, his face potentially attached to a story about heroism and corporate reform. He thought about his coworkers knowing that he was the reason for the policy change, about the attention and scrutiny and the way people would look at him differently. Part of him wanted to refuse, to demand anonymity, to keep his head down the way he'd spent 6 years learning to do. But another part, the part that was tired of being invisible, that wanted Maya to see her father as someone who stood up and was counted, that part whispered that maybe this mattered more than his comfort. "Use my name," he said. "Tell the story accurately, but make sure it's clear that I didn't do it for recognition or reward. I did it because it was right. That distinction matters." "It does."
and I'll make sure they get it right. Celeste's relief was visible. Thank you for trusting me with this. You've earned the trust. They sat quietly for a moment, and then Celeste laughed, a sudden, slightly broken sound. You know what's funny? 6 weeks ago, I would have fired someone for suggesting we increase labor costs by 20% with no immediate ROI. I would have had numbers and projections and 10 reasons why it was bad business. Now I'm voluntarily taking a PR victory lap for doing something that's going to cost the company millions. But it's the right thing. That's what terrifies me. I'm making decisions based on what's right instead of what's profitable. That's not how I was trained to think. That's not how you build an empire. She looked at him. You've changed how I see everything, Ethan. My company, my employees, my own daughter. I don't know if I should thank you or resent you for it. Thank me, Ethan suggested. Resentment seems counterproductive. Celeste smiled, but there was something wistful in it. I keep thinking about that morning. If the elevator hadn't broken, if I'd left 5 minutes earlier, if I'd been even slightly less terrible to you, would I still have learned these lessons, or would I have just kept being who I was, efficient and successful, and completely disconnected from the human cost of my efficiency? You can't know, and it doesn't matter. You're different now. That's what counts. Am I? Or am I just scared and overcompensating because I almost lost Ava? Celeste's voice dropped. What happens when the fear fades? When she's been healthy for 6 months or a year, and I forget how close we came? Will I go back to being the person who yells at janitors over elevator malfunctions? I don't think you will. How can you be sure? Because you're asking the question. People who slip back into their worst selves don't spend time worrying about whether they will. They just do. Ethan drained his coffee. Give yourself some credit, Celeste. You're trying. That's more than most people in your position would do. Upstairs, something crashed, followed by immediate giggling. Both adults tensed, listening, but the girls' voices continued in happy chaos. Whatever had fallen apparently hadn't involved injuries. I should check on them, Celeste said, but she didn't move. Probably. They stayed at the island, suspended in the strange intimacy that had developed between them. Two parents bound by crisis and gratitude and the growing awareness that their daughter's friendship was creating a connection neither of them quite knew how to navigate. Can I ask you something personal? Celeste's voice was careful. Sure. Maya's mother, what happened there? Ethan had known this question would come eventually. It always did. We weren't together long. A few months, maybe. She got pregnant, decided to keep the baby, and I committed to being there. Then Maya was born premature with the heart defect, and her mother looked at this tiny baby with all these tubes and machines and just couldn't do it. She signed away her parental rights when Maya was 3 days old, and I never saw her again. I'm sorry. I'm not. Maya deserves a parent who wants to be there. If her mother couldn't be that person, better she left early than stayed and made everyone miserable. Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact, the old wound so thoroughly scarred over that he barely felt it anymore. It's been hard, but we're okay. We've always been okay. You're more than okay. You're... Celeste stopped. I was going to say you're an incredible father, but that feels inadequate. You're the kind of parent I'm trying to be, present, committed, willing to sacrifice everything for your child. You are that kind of parent. You were just so busy trying to build security for Ava that you forgot to actually be secure with her. Ethan gentled his voice. That's fixable. You're fixing it now. By working less and being home more, and letting myself be human instead of perfect. Celeste's smile was self-deprecating. It's surprisingly difficult to be mediocre when you've spent your entire life being excellent. You're not mediocre. You're just recalibrating what excellence means. When did you become so wise? When I became a single parent to a medically fragile child. Nothing teaches you what matters faster than that. They were interrupted by the girls thundering down the stairs, dragging backpacks and art supplies. We're going to the park, Ava announced. Mom, can we? Please. Maya's never been to the park with the big playground, and we want to show her. Celeste glanced at Ethan. The park is 2 blocks away. We could walk there, let them play for an hour? Sure. Maya, did you bring your jacket? In my backpack. The 4 of them walked to the park together,
the girls running ahead while the adults followed at a more sedate pace. The park was exactly what Ethan expected from an Upper Arlington neighborhood. Pristine playground equipment, manicured grass, the kind of safe, prosperous environment where children played without anyone worrying too much about their safety. Maya and Ava claimed the swings immediately, pumping their legs in unison and trying to see who could go higher. Celeste and Ethan sat on a nearby bench, close enough to supervise but far enough to give the girls space. "She's getting stronger," Ethan observed, watching Ava swing. "You can see it in how she moves." "The doctors are pleased with her progress. Another few weeks and she'll be cleared for school." Celeste's voice held relief and worry in equal measure. "I'm terrified to send her back. What if something happens again? What if I'm not there? Then someone else will be there. Teachers, nurses, other parents. You can't wrap her in bubble wrap forever." "I know, but I want to." Celeste laughed shakily. "I want to keep her home forever where I can watch her every second," which is insane and overprotective and exactly what my therapist says I need to work through. "You're seeing a therapist?" "Started 2 weeks ago. Trauma response, apparently. Nearly losing your child does a number on your mental health. Who knew?" She said it lightly, but Ethan heard the strain underneath. "That's good. That you're getting help." "It doesn't feel good. It feels like I'm falling apart when I'm supposed to be holding everything together." Celeste watched Ava swing higher. "But my therapist says that's the point, that I've been holding too tightly to control for too long and something had to break." "And it did." "And it did," Celeste agreed. "But you know what's strange? I don't want to go back to how things were before. Even though it's harder now, even though I feel vulnerable and uncertain all the time, I don't want to be the person I was 6 weeks ago." "That's growth. It's terrifying." "Growth usually is." They sat in companionable silence, watching their daughters play. The November sun was weak but present, the air cold enough to sting but not quite frozen. Other families dotted the playground, mothers with strollers, fathers tossing footballs, grandparents supervising toddlers. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that 2 of their neighbors were sitting on this bench piecing themselves back together after their worlds had nearly ended. "Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone else?" Celeste's voice was so quiet, Ethan almost missed it. "Of course." "When they were operating on Ava, when I was sitting in that waiting room alone, I kept thinking about all the things I'd missed. Not big things. I made her recitals and parent-teacher conferences. I remembered birthdays and holidays. But small things. Normal things. I couldn't remember the last time I'd just sat with her and colored, or played a game that wasn't educational, or let her stay up late watching movies just because she wanted to." Celeste's voice cracked. "I was so busy building her a perfect future that I forgot to give her a good present. And I thought, if she dies, if this is it, she'll die thinking her mother cared more about board meetings than about her. But she didn't die. And now you get to do it differently. Now I get a second chance I don't deserve." "Everyone deserves second chances," Ethan said firmly. "That's the whole point of being human. We mess up, we learn, we try again." "Is that what you tell yourself? About Maya's mother?" The question surprised him. "What do you mean? Do you think she deserves a second chance? If she showed up tomorrow wanting to be part of Maya's life?" Ethan considered carefully. "I think she deserves the chance to try to be better. Whether Maya would want that relationship is up to Maya when she's old enough to decide. But yeah, I believe in second chances, even for people who hurt us. Even for me? Especially for you, because you're actually taking it." Celeste looked at him with an expression that made Ethan's chest tighten. Gratitude and vulnerability and something else he didn't want to name. They were sitting close on the bench, close enough that he could smell her perfume, could see the fine lines around her eyes that her makeup usually hid. She was beautiful in a way that was dangerous to notice, because noticing meant acknowledging that she wasn't just Ava's mother or his indirect employer or the woman whose daughter he'd saved. She was a person, a woman, someone who looked at him like he mattered. "Daddy, watch!" Maya's voice shattered the moment. "I can do a flip off the swing." "Absolutely not," Ethan called back, his heart in his throat. "No flips, just regular swinging." Maya laughed and stayed on the swing, and the moment with Celeste passed, but the awareness it had created lingered like smoke. They stayed at the park for another hour,
then walked back to the house for the dinner Celeste insisted on providing.
The girls ate pizza and chattered about their fantasy kingdom, while the adults made small talk and pretended neither of them had felt that charged moment on the park bench. When it was time to leave, Ava hugged Maya goodbye with the fierce intensity of children who found their person. Same time next week? If that's okay with both dads, Celeste said, then caught herself. I mean, I'm not her dad, obviously. I'm her mother, but we know what you meant, Ethan said, amused. Yes, same time next week works for us. On the bus home, Maya fell asleep against his shoulder, exhausted from playing. Ethan held her carefully and thought about second chances and growth and the terrifying vulnerability of letting people in. He'd spent 6 years building walls around himself and Maya, keeping them safe in their small, controlled world. Now those walls were crumbling, and he wasn't sure if that was liberation or just a different kind of danger. His phone buzzed, a text from Celeste. Thank you for today, for the conversation, for understanding, for being patient with me while I figure out how to be a better person. See? Ethan stared at the message for a long moment before responding. You're already a better person. You just needed permission to believe it. See you next week. The bus carried them through the darkening city, past neighborhoods like Upper Arlington that Ethan had never imagined living in, past the university where he'd start classes in January, past the hospital where he'd given blood and changed the trajectory of multiple lives without meaning to. His life was splitting into before and after, and he was standing right at the fault line, watching everything shift. Maya stirred against him, mumbling something about dragons in her sleep. Ethan kissed the top of her head and made himself a promise. Whatever happened next, however his life rearranged itself around school and work, and this strange new friendship with Celeste Harrington, Maya would always come first. She was his North Star, his reason, his whole heart walking around outside his body. Everything else was just noise. The weeks before Christmas passed in a blur of preparation and adjustment. Ethan's new position at Alderstone started in early December, and the change was immediate and disorienting. Instead of night shifts cleaning, he worked 3 partial days in facilities maintenance, the transitional role they'd created while he completed his degree. The work was still physical, but more technical, and he was treated as staff rather than invisible contract labor. People knew his name, said hello in the hallways, asked him to join the maintenance team for coffee breaks. It was strange and wonderful, and occasionally uncomfortable. He kept waiting for someone to point out that he didn't belong, that he was still just the janitor playing dress-up in a button-down shirt. But it never happened. The transition into being seen was almost harder than being invisible had been. The media coverage of Alderstone's policy change hit the week before Christmas, and it was bigger than Ethan had anticipated. The story got picked up nationally, not front-page news, but present enough that his coworkers started recognizing him from the articles. The Columbus Dispatch ran a feature with a photo of him at the hospital blood donation center, and suddenly he was the face of corporate responsibility and ordinary heroism. Marcus, his former cleaning supervisor, cornered him in the break room one afternoon. Man, I had no idea. About your daughter, about the blood donation, about any of it. You never said anything. Didn't seem important, Ethan said, uncomfortable with the attention. It's important now. 300 people have better jobs because of you, because you had the guts to tell a billionaire she was wrong. Marcus shook his hand firmly. That takes courage, brother. Don't let anyone tell you different. Ethan mumbled something modest and escaped, but the conversation repeated itself throughout the week. People thanking him, telling him their stories about how the new benefits would change their lives. A single mother in food services who could finally afford consistent childcare. An older maintenance worker who'd been rationing his diabetes medication. A security guard whose wife was pregnant and who'd been terrified about the hospital bills. The weight of it was crushing and uplifting in equal measure. Ethan had suggested a policy change because it seemed right. He hadn't fully comprehended how many lives that change would touch, how many families would breathe easier because Celeste Harrington had listened to a janitor's moral argument and chosen to act on it. The Saturday before Christmas, Maya and Ethan went to Celeste's house for what had become their weekly visit. This time, though, Celeste had a surprise waiting. The living room was transformed. A massive Christmas tree dominated one corner, decorated with the kind of professional precision that suggested hired designers. Presents were already piled underneath, wrapped in matching paper with elaborate bows. Ava and I wanted to do something special, Celeste explained when she saw Ethan's expression. To thank you for everything. You didn't need to, I know I didn't need to. I wanted to. Please just accept it gracefully. Ava pulled Maya toward the tree, pointing out specific ornaments and explaining their significance. The girls had grown so close over the past month that they finished each other's sentences and communicated in a shorthand only they understood. Watching them, Ethan felt a complicated mix of joy and fear.
Maya had never had a friendship this deep, and the intensity of it worried him. What would happen when reality reasserted itself, when the novelty wore off, when Celeste remembered that she was a billionaire and he was a maintenance worker taking night classes? Stop overthinking, Celeste said quietly beside him. I can see your brain working. Whatever you're worried about, let it go, just for today. How do you know I'm worried? Because you get this line right here. She reached up and touched the space between his eyebrows. When you're trying to solve problems that don't have solutions yet. Her touch was brief and casual, but Ethan felt it like electricity. He stepped back slightly, needing distance, needing to remember all the reasons this, whatever this was becoming, was a terrible idea. The girls are good together, he said, deflecting. Maya's never had a friend like Ava. The feeling is mutual. Ava talks about Maya constantly.
Her teachers at school have noticed she's more confident, more willing to participate. Having a friend who doesn't treat her like she's fragile has been good for her. Maya's fragile too. She just hides it better. They help each other be brave. That's what good friendships do. Celeste paused. I'd like to think we're becoming good friends too, you and me. Ethan looked at her carefully. She was wearing jeans and a red sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked younger than her 35 years. Softer. More like the mother of a 7-year-old than the CEO of a corporate empire. We are friends, he said finally. Good ones. Good. Celeste's smile was genuine and slightly uncertain. Because I don't have many of those. People who knew me before Alderstone, who want something from me, who see me as useful. But you see me as just Celeste, Ava's mom. A person trying to figure things out, that's rare. Maybe you need to expand your social circle.
Maybe I already am. They spent the afternoon doing aggressively normal Christmas activities, decorating cookies that Celeste had ordered from a bakery, watching holiday movies, letting the girls string popcorn garlands that would never actually make it onto the tree. It was domestic and comfortable, and so far from Ethan's usual life that he felt like he was playing a role in someone else's story. When it was time to leave, Celeste insisted they take presents home, wrapped boxes that she promised were appropriate, nothing extravagant, just small things she'd thought Maya might like. Ethan tried to refuse, but Maya's pleading eyes and Celeste's firm insistence wore him down. Next week is Christmas, Celeste said at the door. I know you probably have plans, but if you don't, if you'd like to spend the day here, we'd love to have you, both of you. I don't know. Just think about it. No pressure.
But Ava and I are planning to be alone otherwise, and it seems silly when we could all be alone together. She smiled. That came out wrong. I meant we could all be together, not alone. Together. I understood. Ethan felt his resistance crumbling. Can I let you know in a few days? Of course. On the bus home, Maya clutched the presents and asked the question Ethan had been dreading. Daddy, are we going to spend Christmas with Ava and her mom? Would you want to? Yes. No hesitation, absolute certainty. I really like them, and it would be more fun than just us at home. Ethan thought about their usual Christmas, small but cheerful, presents from the dollar store wrapped in newspaper comics, dinner from the one restaurant open on December 25th. It was what they could afford, what they'd always done. But now there was an alternative, a wealthy home, professionally decorated, a tree surrounded by presents that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Let me think about it, okay, baby? Maya nodded, but Ethan saw the hope in her eyes. She wanted this. Wanted the friendship with Ava to extend into holidays. Wanted the temporary magic of Celeste's world to become part of their regular lives. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat with his phone and Mrs. Chen's words echoing in his head.
You take this chance, you grab it with both hands, and you don't let go. He texted Celeste, "We'd love to spend Christmas with you and Ava. Thank you for inviting us." Her response came immediately. "You just made Ava's Christmas, and mine. Thank you." Ethan set down his phone and stared at his small apartment, the thrift store furniture, the patched walls, the careful economy of everything they owned. This was his life. This was real. Upper Arlington and Christmas trees and women who looked at him like he was more than his circumstances. That was borrowed time, a temporary gift that would eventually end when reality reasserted itself. But maybe Mrs. Chen was right. Maybe it was time to stop protecting himself from disappointment and just grab the chance while it was offered. He thought about second chances and growth and the terrifying vulnerability of letting people in. Thought about Maya's joy and Ava's laughter and Celeste's uncertain smile. Maybe borrowed time was still worth living. Maybe that was the whole point. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of crystalline winter day that made Columbus look like it belonged on a greeting card. Ethan woke early, nerves and anticipation tangled in his chest like barbed wire. Maya was already awake, sitting on her bed fully dressed in the nicest outfit she owned, a navy dress with white tights that Mrs. Chen had bought her for Thanksgiving. "I've been ready for an hour," Maya announced. "Can we go now?" "It's 7 in the morning, baby. We're not expected until 10. "But I'm ready now." Ethan laughed despite his anxiety. "How about breakfast first? We need to eat something before we go." They made pancakes together in their tiny kitchen, Maya chattering about what presents Ava might have received and whether there would be snow later. Ethan tried to focus on her joy, on this moment, but his mind kept spiraling through worst-case scenarios. What if he'd misread everything? What if this was charity dressed up as friendship? What if spending Christmas in Celeste's world only made returning to their own that much harder? By 9:30, he couldn't stall anymore. They bundled into winter coats. Maya's was too small, something Ethan made a mental note to address with his next paycheck, and took the bus to Upper Arlington. Maya clutched the presents they'd brought, a drawing she'd made for Ava and a box of fancy tea Ethan had agonized over at the store, trying to find something that would feel thoughtful without being presumptuous. Celeste's house looked magical in the morning light. Tiny white lights outlined every window and wrapped around the trees in the front yard. Through the windows, Ethan could see the Christmas tree they'd helped decorate, now lit and glowing. It looked like something from a movie, aspirational and perfect. Ava threw open the door before they'd even reached it, wearing matching pajamas with snowflakes on them. "Maya, you're here! Mom said we have to wait until everyone's together before we open presents, but I've been waiting forever." "It's been 30 minutes, Celeste corrected, appearing behind her daughter. She wore matching pajamas too, and her hair was in a messy braid, and she looked so different from the CEO who'd berated him that October morning that Ethan felt momentarily disoriented. "Merry Christmas! Come in, please. It's freezing out there." The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee and something baking. Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. It was warmth and comfort and wealth so casual it didn't need to announce itself. "I made cinnamon rolls," Celeste said, leading them to the kitchen. "Well, I heated up cinnamon rolls that my housekeeper prepared yesterday, but I'm claiming credit for remembering to set the timer." "They smell amazing," Ethan said honestly. "Can we eat them and then open presents?" Ava asked. "Please?" That was the plan. They ate breakfast around the kitchen island, the girls side by side, Ethan and Celeste across from them, and it felt surreal in its normalcy. Just two families sharing Christmas morning as if the vast differences in their circumstances were irrelevant. Maya told a complicated story about her class's holiday pageant, and Ava responded with an equally elaborate tale about her school's winter concert. The adults contributed where appropriate and mostly just watched their daughters be happy. After breakfast, they moved to the living room for presents. The pile under the tree was intimidating, easily 30 or 40 wrapped boxes in various sizes. Ethan felt his stomach clench. This was too much. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. "Before anyone panics," Celeste said, reading his expression, "most of those are for charity. We're donating them to a children's hospital this afternoon. The ones for us are marked with names." She was right. Only about 10 presents had name tags, and half were clearly from Ava to Maya and vice versa. The others were modest-sized boxes that suggested thoughtfulness rather than extravagance.
Ethan felt his shoulders drop slightly. Can we start? Maya asked, practically vibrating with excitement. Go ahead. The next half hour was chaos in the best way. The girls opened their presents to each other first. Maya's drawing was received with genuine delight, and Ava's gift to Maya was a leather-bound journal with the words "Story Writer" embossed on the cover. Then came the presents from the adults. Art supplies for both girls. Books Celeste had chosen based on their fantasy kingdom obsession. A warm winter coat for Maya that Ethan pretended not to notice was from an expensive brand. When it was Ethan's turn, he opened Celeste's gift to find a high-quality backpack clearly designed for college students, complete with a padded laptop compartment and organizational pockets. For when you start classes next month, Celeste said. I noticed you mentioned your old backpack was falling apart. Thank you. This is really thoughtful.
You're welcome. She opened his gift, the tea, and her face lit up with genuine pleasure. This is from the shop downtown, isn't it? The specialty place? I love this blend. How did you know? I pay attention, Ethan said, and something in the air between them shifted, became charged with the same electricity he'd felt at the park. The girls had already abandoned their presents and were building an elaborate fort out of wrapping paper and ribbon. Celeste suggested they watch a movie, and the four of them settled on the massive sectional sofa, the girls on one end, the adults on the other, for a viewing of an animated Christmas film that Ava had been begging to see. Halfway through, Maya fell asleep against Ava's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement. Ava followed soon after, and Celeste carefully adjusted a blanket over both girls. They're adorable, she whispered, settling back beside Ethan. Yeah. He couldn't take his eyes off Maya's peaceful face. She's never had this, a normal Christmas with friends. It's usually just us, very quiet, very modest. This is too much? Celeste's voice held worry. I tried not to go overboard, but I wanted it to be special. No, it's perfect. That's what scares me. Why would perfect scare you? Ethan struggled to articulate the fear that had been building for weeks. Because this isn't sustainable. You and me are daughters, this whole situation. It only works because we're in this weird grace period after the crisis. But eventually reality reasserts itself. You remember you're a billionaire CEO. I remember I'm a maintenance worker taking night classes. The differences that don't seem to matter right now start mattering again. Celeste was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. What if they don't start mattering again? They always do. Not always. She turned to face him, and they were very close on the sofa, close enough that Ethan could see the flecks of blue in her gray eyes. I know what you're thinking, that this is temporary, that I'll get bored or remember my real life or decide that friendship with you doesn't fit my image. But Ethan, what happened with Ava? That wasn't a grace period. That was an awakening. I'm not going to forget what matters just because time passes. People say that, and then life happens and priorities shift, and I'm not people, Celeste interrupted firmly. I'm me, and I'm telling you that whatever this friendship is, whatever it's becoming, I'm committed to it. I'm committed to you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to address fully. Ethan's heart was hammering, and he was intensely aware of how close they were sitting, of how easy it would be to close the distance, of how much he wanted to despite all his logical objections. I'm not in your league, he said quietly. Financially, socially, any way you measure it. At some point, that's going to become a problem. Only if we let it. Celeste's voice was steady. I'm not interested in measuring people's worth by their bank accounts, not anymore. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. You learned it yourself. You showed me it was possible to be different. That's teaching. She paused, then continued with visible courage. Can I tell you something honest? Something I probably shouldn't admit? Okay. I think about you constantly. About our conversations, about the way you see the world, about how you manage to be so decent when life has given you every reason not to be. And I know it's complicated and probably inappropriate, and there are power dynamics we'd need to navigate carefully, but She stopped, took a breath. I care about you, Ethan, as more than just a friend, and I think you might care about me too, but you're too busy protecting yourself to admit it. Ethan's throat had gone dry. Everything she was saying was true, and that terrified him more than if she'd been wrong. "Celeste, I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I'm not expecting you to suddenly forget all your very legitimate concerns. I just wanted to be honest about what I'm feeling. So you know. So it's out there." "It's out there," Ethan managed.
They sat in charged silence, the movie playing to an audience of sleeping children. Ethan's mind was racing through possibilities and consequences. Getting involved with Celeste would complicate everything: his new job, his education, his carefully controlled life. It would mean trusting someone with his heart when he'd spent 6 years learning to trust only himself. It would mean believing that differences could be bridged, that love could be enough despite practical obstacles. But it would also mean letting himself want something more than survival. It would mean showing Maya that her father deserved happiness too. It would mean taking a chance on the woman who'd helped give him back his future. "I do care about you," he heard himself say. "More than I should. More than is probably smart. But I'm terrified of messing this up. For me, for Maya, for you and Ava. What if we try this and it doesn't work? We've built something good for our daughters. I can't risk destroying that. So we'll be careful. We'll go slow. We'll make sure the girls' friendship is protected regardless of what happens between us." Celeste reached out and took his hand, and the contact felt momentous. "But Ethan, we can't spend our lives afraid of what might go wrong. Sometimes you have to believe that things might go right." Her hand was warm in his, small and capable, and Ethan realized that at some point in the past 3 months, Celeste Harrington had stopped being the cruel CEO from that October morning and had become just Celeste. Someone who laughed at her own cooking disasters, who cried when she was scared, who was trying desperately to be better than she'd been. Someone real. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Okay, we'll try. Carefully, slowly, with our daughter's well-being as the top priority." Ethan squeezed her hand. "But if at any point this starts feeling wrong or dangerous for them, we stop. Agreed?" "Agreed." Celeste's smile was radiant. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for being worth the chance." They sat like that, hands clasped, until the movie ended and the girls began to stir. Nothing had fundamentally changed. They were still who they'd always been, with all the complications that entailed. But something had shifted into possibility, and that was enough for now. The rest of Christmas Day passed in comfortable domesticity. They made lunch together, grilled cheese and tomato soup because Ava insisted it was her favorite Christmas meal. The girls played with their new art supplies while the adults talked about Ethan's upcoming semester and Celeste's plans for a single-parent support initiative at Alderstone. As evening approached, Celeste suggested they drive the charity presents to the children's hospital together. "Ava and I do this every year," she explained. "It's important to her that kids who are stuck in the hospital on Christmas still get presents. After everything she went through, she understands what that's like." The 4 of them loaded boxes into Celeste's Mercedes, the same car she'd driven to find Ethan at the warehouse, though it felt like years ago rather than weeks. At the hospital, they delivered the presents to the pediatric wing, and Ethan watched Ava carefully arrange toys in the play area while Maya helped distribute books to the nurses' station. They were almost finished when Ethan saw a familiar face. Dr. Morrison, Maya's cardiologist, was reviewing charts at the nurses' station. "Mr. Cross and Maya, what brings you here on Christmas?" "Delivering presents," Maya explained proudly, "for kids who have to be in the hospital." Dr. Morrison's expression softened. "That's wonderful." She noticed Celeste and Ava, and recognition flickered across her face. "And you must be the Harringtons. I heard about what happened. I'm glad to see you're doing well, Ava." "I'm all better now," Ava said. "The doctors fixed me." "That's what we like to hear." Dr. Morrison looked between the two families with obvious curiosity but professional discretion. "It's good to see you all together. Merry Christmas." As they walked back to the car, Maya tugged Ethan's hand. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always, baby." "Are you and Ms. Celeste going to get married?" Ethan nearly choked. Beside him, Celeste made a strangled sound that might have been laughter. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you look at each other the way people do in movies, before they get married." Maya's voice was matter of fact. "And because I heard you talking on the couch
when you thought we were asleep, about caring about each other.
You were eavesdropping, Ethan said, trying for stern and failing. A little bit. So are you? Ethan glanced at Celeste, who looked equally panicked and amused. We're friends, Maya. Good friends. And maybe someday that might become something more. But right now we're just figuring things out, Celeste finished. Grown-up relationships are complicated. If you do get married, can Ava be my sister? Maya asked. Because I've always wanted a sister. Me too, Ava chimed in. We could share a room and stay up late telling stories and it would be perfect. The adults exchanged helpless looks over the girls' heads. Let's not plan the wedding just yet, Ethan managed. We're taking things slow. Okay, Maya said, clearly unconvinced. But when you stop taking things slow, can we at least have a say in the wedding cake flavor? That night, back at their apartment, Ethan tucked Maya into bed and braced himself for more questions. But she just hugged him tight and said, Today was the best Christmas ever, Daddy. Thank you. You're welcome, baby. I'm glad you had fun. I really like them. Celeste and Ava. I hope we get to keep them. Me too, Ethan admitted. Me too. After Maya was asleep, Ethan sat in his small living room and thought about how much his life had changed in 3 months. In October, he'd been invisible, struggling, certain that survival was the best he could hope for. Now he had a real job with benefits. He was going back to school, his daughter had a best friend, and he'd somehow ended up in a tentative relationship with a woman who was so far out of his league it should have been laughable. Except it wasn't laughable. It was terrifying and exhilarating and real. His phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. Thank you for today, for trusting me with this, for letting me be part of your Christmas. It meant everything. Ethan typed back, Thank you for making it magical, for Maya and for me. I'm scared of what comes next, but I'm willing to find out. Her response came quickly. Scared is okay. Scared means it matters. Sweet dreams, Ethan. He fell asleep on his pull-out couch thinking about possibility, about second chances, about how sometimes the worst moments could become catalysts for the best changes. Spring semester started in January with a brutality that Ethan had forgotten was possible. Thermodynamics and materials science were both harder than he remembered, and trying to balance coursework with his job and parenting left him perpetually exhausted. He fell asleep over textbooks, missed social cues because his brain was stuck solving problems, and lived on a diet of coffee and determination. But he was doing it. Week by week, assignment by assignment, he was actually doing it. Celeste helped in ways both large and small. She connected him with a tutor for thermodynamics when he started struggling. She accidentally ordered too much takeout and dropped it by his apartment on nights when she knew he was drowning in homework. She took both girls for entire Saturdays so Ethan could study uninterrupted, and she never made him feel like he owed her for any of it. They were careful about their developing relationship, aware that 2 single parents dating came with complications that required delicate handling. But slowly, cautiously, they built something real. Coffee dates while the girls were at school. Long phone conversations after Maya was asleep. Stolen moments of hand-holding and soft kisses that felt precious because they were chosen rather than rushed into. By March, Ethan had aced his first round of midterms and was starting to believe he might actually finish his degree. By April, the girls' friendship had solidified into the kind of bond that would last decades. By May, Celeste had launched the single-parent support program at Alderstone, subsidized childcare, flexible scheduling, emergency leave policies, and 3 other Columbus companies had announced similar initiatives. The world was changing in small but meaningful ways, and Ethan was changing with it. One Saturday, in early June, 6 months after that October morning when Celeste had yelled at him over an elevator, Ethan found himself back at St. Vincent's Hospital for Maya's regular cardiology checkup. Dr. Morrison did her examination, checked all the numbers, and delivered the news with a smile. Everything looks perfect. Her heart function is excellent. Her growth is on track, and I'm comfortable extending her appointments to annual checkups instead of every 6 months. She's doing remarkably well. Maya beamed. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes and blinked them away quickly. Annual. That's really good? That's really good, Dr. Morrison confirmed. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. She's thriving.
They left the cardiology wing in high spirits, and Maya chattered about how she could tell Ava that she only had to come once a year now.
They were almost to the main entrance when Ethan saw a familiar sight. The family waiting area where he'd found Celeste sitting alone that terrible night, scared and broken and waiting for news about Ava.
"Daddy, why are you stopping?"
Just remembering something. Ethan crouched down to Maya's level. "Do you remember when we were here before? When the little girl was hurt and I gave blood?" "Ava. When you saved Ava. Yeah, that was a really important day. Everything changed after that. Because you helped someone who needed it. Because I helped, and because your very smart daughter reminded me that everyone is somebody's whole world." Ethan pulled Maya into a hug. "You make me want to be better. You know that?" "You're already the best daddy," Maya said with 6-year-old certainty. "But I'm glad you helped Ava anyway, because now we have them, and they have us, and everyone's whole world got bigger." Out of the mouths of children. Ethan kissed the top of her head and stood. "Come on, baby. Let's go tell Celeste and Ava your good news." They took the bus to Upper Arlington. Ethan still didn't own a car, though that would change soon with his increased salary, and found Celeste in her home office finishing up work emails. She looked up when they entered, and her face transformed with her smile. "How did it go?" "Annual checkups now," Ethan announced. "Dr. Morrison says she's thriving." "Oh, that's wonderful." Celeste crossed the room and pulled Maya into a hug, then reached for Ethan. He went willingly, and the three of them stood there in a tangle of relief and joy. When Celeste pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. "Happy tears," she clarified. "I'm so happy for you both." "Where's Ava?" Maya asked. "In her room, probably creating another fantasy kingdom. Go find her." Maya ran off, and Celeste turned to Ethan with an expression he'd learned to recognize. She had something important to say and was working up the courage. "What is it?" he asked gently. "I've been thinking about something, and I want to run it by you before I do anything because it affects both of us." She took his hand. "My company is building a new facility, a research and development center for engineering innovation. It's going to need a full team, including entry-level engineers for when it opens in 2 years." "Okay. I want you to consider applying for one of those positions when you graduate. Not because of me, not because you feel obligated, but because you'd be genuinely qualified, and I think you'd be brilliant at it." She rushed on before he could interrupt. "I already talked to HR about conflict of interest policies. If we're in a relationship, you wouldn't report to me directly, and all hiring decisions would go through a blind review process. It would be completely legitimate." Ethan's mind was spinning. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work at a company that values you. That happens to be mine, but the job would be yours on merit." Celeste's voice was earnest. "But I wanted to ask first, because I know how important independence is to you, and I don't ever want you to feel like I'm trying to control your future. You're offering me a career because you believe I can do it." "Yes." "And you've already set up safeguards to make sure it's fair." "Yes." Ethan thought about it for approximately 10 seconds. "I'd be honored to apply. Thank you for thinking of me." Celeste's relief was visible. "Really? You're not upset?" "Why would I be upset? You're helping me build the career I always wanted. That's—" He stopped, overwhelmed. "That's everything, Celeste." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, they were both smiling. "I love you," Celeste said, and it was the first time either of them had said it out loud. "I probably shouldn't. It's probably too soon, but I do. I love you, Ethan Cross." "I love you too," he said, and felt the truth of it settle into his bones. "Even though you're terrifying and wealthy and completely out of my league." "Stop saying that. We're in the same league, the league of people who are trying their best and figuring it out as they go." "That's a terrible league name." "Fine. The league of people who found each other when they needed it most and decided to be brave enough to see where it led." "Better." They stood in her office, wrapped in each other, and Ethan thought about that October morning. How he'd swallowed his pride and cleaned floors and accepted humiliation because he had a daughter to feed. How Celeste had been cold and cruel because she'd forgotten that power came with responsibility. How one medical emergency had shattered and rebuilt both their lives into something neither had imagined but both desperately needed. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. The elevator, the hospital, all of it. Every single day. It was the worst and best day of my life. Celeste pulled back to look at him. I nearly lost Ava, but I found you. I saw who I'd become and decided to be different. If I could go back and change it, make it so Ava never got hurt, I would in a heartbeat. But I can't. So instead, I'm grateful for what came after. Me too. Upstairs, they heard the girls laughing. Ethan and Celeste went up to find them in Ava's room, once again building elaborate worlds out of paper and imagination. They were planning a summer, beach trips and art camps and sleepovers, and all the normal childhood joy that both of them deserved after their separate brushes with fragility. That evening, Celeste insisted on making dinner for all of them. She was a terrible cook, something Ethan had learned over the past months, but she was trying, and the gesture mattered more than the slightly burned pasta. They ate together at the kitchen table, the four of them, and it felt like family in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. After dinner, while the girls watched a movie, Celeste pulled out her laptop. I want to show you something. The mock-ups for the Parent Support Initiative website just came in. She opened a page that featured photos of diverse families, single parents, working mothers, fathers juggling childcare and careers. The text talked about dignity, support, and corporate responsibility. At the bottom was a quote, "We build strong companies by supporting the people who build them." It's perfect, Ethan said. There's more. Celeste clicked to another page, a testimonials section. We interviewed some of the employees about how the new policies have impacted them. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to share your story. Nothing you're uncomfortable with, just what it meant to you to have benefits and security. Ethan read through the other testimonials. Single mothers talking about affordable childcare. Older workers describing the relief of healthcare coverage. One man whose daughter had required emergency surgery and who hadn't had to choose between her health and his rent. I'll do it, Ethan said. If it helps other people, I'll absolutely do it. Thank you. Celeste closed the laptop. You know what the board said when I first proposed this initiative? They said it was too expensive, too complicated, that it would set a precedent we couldn't sustain. But I told them that some precedents need to be set, that being the kind of company that takes care of people is worth the cost. And they listened. Eventually, after a lot of arguing and compromising and threatening to quit if they didn't at least pilot the program, she smiled. Turns out having principles is exhausting. Who knew? You're doing good work. Real work that matters. We're doing good work, Celeste corrected. This started with you, with your courage to tell me I was wrong. Never forget that. They sat together in the kitchen while the evening light faded and the girls' movie played in the background. Ethan thought about all the small moments that had led here. The blood donation, the hospital waiting room, the policy suggestion, the tentative friendship that had grown into love. None of it had been planned. All of it had been necessary. By September, Ethan was starting his final year of coursework. The classes were brutal, but he'd found his rhythm. He studied during Maya's school hours, attended evening lectures, and somehow managed to maintain a B+ average while working part-time and dating a billionaire. It shouldn't have been possible, but he was doing it. The relationship with Celeste deepened slowly, carefully, with both of them aware of the stakes. They were thoughtful about when they told the girls they were officially together, waiting until they were certain it was sustainable, making sure both daughters understood and approved. Maya and Ava were delighted, immediately planning elaborate scenarios for when they'd officially become sisters. Not yet, Celeste warned. We're dating, not engaged. But you will get engaged, right? Ava pressed. Eventually? Maybe, Celeste hedged, if things keep going well. Later, alone with Ethan, she admitted, I already know I want to marry you. Is that crazy? We've only been together 8 months. We've known each other longer than that, since October. Since the worst morning of my professional life when I was cruel to you for no reason. And then the afternoon when I helped save your daughter and you saw me as a person. Ethan pulled her close. Maybe it's fast, but we're not exactly a conventional couple. Normal timelines might not apply. So you'd say yes? If I asked? Are you asking? Not yet, but someday, when the timing is right. Celeste smiled against his shoulder. I want to do this properly, court you, earn you,
Make sure you know exactly what you're getting into with me. I know what I'm getting into. A brilliant, occasionally overbearing woman who's learning to be vulnerable and who loves fiercely and who makes me want to be better than I thought possible. Ethan kissed the top of her head. I'm not scared anymore, Celeste. I was for a long time, but I'm not now. What changed? I did. You did. We both learned that sometimes the scariest thing is also the rightest thing. By December, 1 year after that first Christmas together, they'd settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Ethan was on track to graduate in May. Celeste's parent support program had been adopted by 12 other companies across Ohio. Maya and Ava were inseparable. The four of them spent most weekends together, and Ethan kept a drawer of clothes at Celeste's house for the nights he stayed over after Maya fell asleep on Ava's floor after another Marathon Fantasy Kingdom session. One Saturday afternoon in mid-December, they were back at St. Vincent's Hospital. Not for Maya's appointment this time, but for a blood drive Ethan had organized with the hospital. He'd become a regular donor, giving blood every 8 weeks like clockwork, and he'd convinced several Alderstone employees to join him. Celeste and the girls came along for moral support. While Ethan was giving his donation, Maya and Ava made cards for the other donors, thanking them for helping save lives. Celeste watched them work and then turned to Ethan. Do you realize that your blood has probably saved a dozen lives this year? I'm just doing what I can. No, you're doing more than that. You're modeling for our daughters what it means to help people, to give of yourself literally and figuratively. She took his free hand. You make me want to be that kind of person too. You already are. I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. After the blood drive, they all went to dinner at the restaurant where Ethan and Maya used to get soup on special occasions. It had been their splurge meal back when money was impossibly tight. Now they could afford fancier places, but Maya had requested this one specifically. This is where we came after you saved Ava, she explained to Celeste and Ava. Daddy was really tired and I was worried about him, but he said the soup would make everything better. Did it? Ava asked. Yeah. And he was right. Everything did get better. Maya looked around the table at her family. Traditional or not, that's what they were. Everything got so much better. That night, after dropping the girls at Celeste's house for a sleepover, Mrs. Chen had agreed to supervise. Celeste drove Ethan to a quiet overlook with a view of downtown Columbus. The city sparkled below them, December cold but clear. I have something to ask you, Celeste said, and her voice was shaking slightly. And I'm terrified you'll say no, but I'm more terrified of not asking. Ethan's heart started pounding. Okay, we've been together for a year. We've been in each other's lives for 14 months. And I know that's not a long time by conventional standards. But Ethan, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. I want to build a life with you. I want to combine our families officially. I want Maya and Ava to be sisters, and I want you to be my partner in everything. She opened the box. Inside was a simple platinum band, elegant but understated, exactly Ethan's style. Ethan Cross, will you marry me? Ethan stared at the ring, at Celeste's nervous face, at the city spread out below them. He thought about that October morning when he'd been invisible and exhausted and certain his life would never be more than survival. He thought about giving blood, about catching a falling child, about one moment of basic human decency that had cascaded into everything good that came after. Yes, he said, and watched joy transform Celeste's expression. Absolutely yes. She slid the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly because, of course, she'd somehow figured out his size. And then she was kissing him and crying and laughing all at once. I love you so much, she said between kisses. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for seeing past who I was to who I could be. Thank you for the same thing, Ethan said, for seeing me when I was invisible. They sat in the car overlooking the city for a long time, planning and dreaming and figuring out how to tell their daughters that they were officially going to be a family. When they finally drove back to Celeste's house, it was late, but both girls were still awake, too excited about their sleepover to actually sleep. Girls, come here, Celeste called. We have something to tell you. Maya and Ava appeared, suspicious and curious.
They looked at the adults' joined hands, at the rings, and their faces went through a rapid evolution of emotions before landing on pure joy. "You're getting married," Ava shrieked. "We're going to be sisters," Maya added. The girls launched themselves at the adults in a tangle of hugs and excitement. Mrs. Chen emerged from the kitchen where she'd apparently been listening, and she was crying happy tears and hugging everyone. "I knew it," she said to Ethan. "From the moment you told me about saving that little girl, I knew something big was starting. You deserve this happiness, Ethan Cross. You deserve all of it." That night, after the excitement had calmed and the girls were finally asleep, Ethan found himself back in Celeste's kitchen, the same kitchen where they'd first really talked, where she'd apologized and he'd suggested policy changes that had altered hundreds of lives. "It started here," Celeste said, reading his thoughts. "You and me. Really started here. No, it started in a hospital hallway when I caught your daughter, or maybe in a lobby when you yelled at me, or maybe the moment I decided to give blood even though I was exhausted." Ethan pulled her close. "Or maybe it was always going to happen, and we just needed the circumstances to find each other." "I like that version." "Me too." They stood together in the quiet house, two people who'd been broken and scared and who'd somehow found each other in the midst of crisis. Who'd chosen to be brave. Who'd built something real out of pain and grace and the simple act of helping when help was needed. 5 months later, Ethan walked across the stage at Ohio State University to receive his mechanical engineering degree. Maya sat in the front row with Celeste and Ava, all three of them cheering loud enough to embarrass him. Mrs. Chen was there too, and several of his co-workers from Alderstone, and even Dr. Morrison from the hospital. 2 weeks after that, he started his new position at Alderstone's R&D facility. The interview process had been rigorous and blind. Celeste had excused herself from all decisions, and when he got the offer, he knew he'd earned it legitimately. And 2 months after that, on a warm June afternoon in Celeste's backyard, Ethan and Celeste got married. It was small and simple, just close friends, family, and the 2 daughters who stood beside them as the flower girls they'd insisted on being. Maya wore a blue dress that matched Ava's, and both of them carried flowers they'd grown themselves in Celeste's garden. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, Maya stage whispered, "Finally," loud enough that everyone laughed. Ethan and Celeste exchanged rings. His matched the engagement band she'd given him. Hers was a simple sapphire that reminded her of the October sky the day everything changed. They promised to love each other, to support their daughters, to build a family on foundation of honesty and respect, and the kind of grace that came from surviving the worst and choosing to be better. When they kissed, their daughters cheered, and Ethan felt something settle into place. This was his life. This family, this woman, this future he'd built from the ashes of that terrible October morning. 6 months later, Maya and Ava were back at St. Vincent's Hospital for their regular checkups. They went together now, the appointment scheduled on the same day because they'd requested it, because they did everything together. Both girls were thriving. Both had been given clean bills of health. Both were growing and happy and secure in ways their parents had once feared impossible. In the waiting room, Ethan sat beside Celeste and watched their daughters play a game involving the aquarium mural and elaborate storytelling. "They're okay," Celeste whispered. "Both of them. They're actually okay." "Yeah, they are. Because you saved Ava, because you gave blood and caught her and refused to walk away. Because we both learned to help each other, you, me, our daughters." Ethan took her hand. "Because sometimes the worst moments crack us open enough to let the light in." Celeste leaned against his shoulder. "I keep thinking about that morning, when I yelled at you, when I was so focused on my schedule that I treated you like nothing. And I'm grateful. Is that terrible? I'm grateful it happened because it made everything after possible. It's not terrible. It's human." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "We're allowed to be grateful for the lessons, even when they came through pain. We should teach our daughters that mistakes can become growth, that cruelty can be transformed into kindness, that saving someone's life might save your own in return." I think we're already teaching them. Look, Maya had just offered Ava the better of her 2 stuffed animals to play with in their game. Ava had responded by sharing the snack she'd been hoarding. Small acts of generosity and love, the kind that built character and connection. "They're going to be okay," Ethan said. "All four of us. We're going to be okay." And sitting in that hospital waiting room where it had all started, where a little girl had seized and a stranger had helped, and everything had changed forever, Ethan believed it. Believed in second chances and growth and the transformative power of simple human decency. Believed in the family they'd built from crisis and courage. Believed in the love that had grown from the ashes of the worst day into something sustainable and real and precious. He'd given blood to save a child, and in return, he'd been given back his life, his future, his family. Sometimes that's how grace worked. You gave what you could, and the world gave back something even better. Not always, not guaranteed, but sometimes. And sometimes was enough. Sometimes was everything.